Chapter 73. NT, thanks to Anonymous, UK, and Thomas Beauvisage, France, for sponsoring this chapter. Chapter 73. Breaking Through to the Scientian Realm. Brother Yi! Dai Xiaohua said anxiously. You filthy beast! Dai Xiaohua had become extremely furious when he saw Yi Shiwen being pushed into the magma pool, without any chance to dodge an attack from the Fire Lin beast. He furiously shot out 100 stages God Fist at the beast, and it suddenly screamed. His Quan Jin broke through the layers of scales and blasted into its body under the scales. Dai Xiaohua's Xiantian level strength had reached its peak, caused by his anger for the beast, and the tyrannical power of his fist technique had truly manifested itself. However, at this time, Dai Xiaohua was unable to chase and kill the Fire Lin beast, because Chao Jinbiao and his family had started an onslaught on them, and Lord Chao Jinbiao was a terrifying Xiantian master, so Dai Xiaohua had to pay attention to them as well. 3 Xiantian masters of the Chao family were already well prepared to obstruct Dai Xiaohua, Chen Taizhou, and Wu Xiaoyang. But Dai Xiaohua was not afraid of these 3 Xiantian masters of the Chao family, but at present, the most terrifying was the fact that Fire Lin beast had already swallowed a major part of the blue flaming lotus and had now entered into transformation period. If this situation dragged on a little longer, and the beast was not killed before the completion of its transformation, then no one would survive. The complexion of Dai Xiaohua, Chen Taizhou, and Wu Xiaoyang had suddenly paled because they never thought that Chao family would actually prepare such a vicious trap. When I go out, I will let my father take care of you Chao family bastards. Wu Xiaoyang gritted his teeth and said in a cold voice. Well, that is if you get a chance to go out. Wu Xiaoyang's opponent Chao Jinshui sneered and said. At the same time, the aura of Fire Lin beast had started to increase rapidly, and with a loud bang, it suddenly broke through the peak of Xiantian first stage and entered into the Xiantian second stage. However, its aura continued to rise and didn't stop. Run, we will make a run for it, and as long as there's one of us who manages to escape from this massacre, Chao family will be exterminated. Chen Taizhou finally shouted these words to collaborate with the 2 Xiantian masters, Dai Xiaohua and Wu Xiaoyang. As for those other warriors, they were like ants in his eyes and he simply did not care about them. Run, where will you run to? Chao Jinbiao laughed, and said. The strength of the Fire Lin beast had already increased dramatically. Its loud roars were echoing in the cave, and its eyes had become blood-red, full of blood and violence, and its gigantic body suddenly leaped towards Chen Taizhou. After entering into the Xiantian second stage, the strength of the Fire Lin beast had increased to a terrifying level, and with just a swoop, it had knocked down Chen Taizhou on the ground. Die, you filthy beast! Chen Taizhou shouted loudly, and his pitch-black palm instantly shot out, containing a terrifying strength, which caused a loud air explosion. Bang! The Fire Lin beast directly lifted up its claw and fiercely stepped upon his hand. Kara! With a sound of breaking bones, the bones inside Chen Taizhou's hand immediately shattered after the Fire Lin beast had directly stepped on his hand. Chen Taizhou screamed in a pitiful voice because its foot was extremely heavy. The beast again stepped on his breastbone and smashed it. Ah! Chen Taizhou screamed, but right then, a raging fire suddenly discharged out from the body of Fire Lin beast and instantly corroded the Xiantian Jinqi that was wrapped around his body, and then burned him to cinders. Ha ha ha! Today, no one's going anywhere! Chao Xing and the Fire Lin beast rushed towards Wu Xiaoyang and Dai Xiaohua respectively. Suddenly, the whole magma pool began to boil up, and an incredibly terrifying aura flushed out of the magma pool, and an innumerable influx of frenzied lingqi formed a huge bubble in the magma. The complexion of all the Xiantian masters present there immediately turned pale. They were all familiar with this scene because this was a breakthrough into the Xiantian realm. The complexion of the people from Chao family especially became pale, because they couldn't comprehend that how could someone break through to the Xiantian realm inside the magma. Dai Xiaohua was delighted, and he seemed to have understood what was happening. Hurry up, kill them all! Chao Jinbiao immediately shouted. Boom! Before they could start the massacre, a loud explosion sound came from the magma, and a large amount of magma spattered in all directions. Except the Fire Lin beast, everyone else quickly used all their might to jump back and escape from the flying magma. They absolutely could not afford to touch it, otherwise they would be roasted alive. A figure covered in red-hot magma jumped out from the magma, and the first one to react was the Fire Lin beast, which immediately pounced towards that figure with its blood-red eyes, full of hatred, looking at that figure. But the Fire Lin beast actually saw an incomparably radiant red-hot long blade flashing. The long blade instantly pierced through the air and maliciously chopped into its body. Bang! The whole cave echoed with a loud sound of metal clash, and in the very next instant, the Fire Lin beast screamed and its gigantic body directly flew far away by this blade attack. There was huge crack on the red scales covering its body, and the blood was gushing out of the wound. This was the first time someone had cut open its scales to this extent. People were giving dumbfounded looks to that person's figure standing in the midair. They couldn't believe their eyes that in an instant, the tables had turned in their favor and the beast on which the Chow family was putting its bet had actually been injured and sent flying by a single blade attack. It was hard for people to accept this favorable turn of events in such a short time. At this time, the shadow descended from the sky and landed on one side of the magma pool. "Brother Yi, you're all right," Dai Xiaohua said with a look of surprise on his face. Wu Xiaoyang was also surprised and looked at Yi Shiwen, although he and Yi Shiwen were unfamiliar, but this time, the unexpected appearance of Yi Shiwen was more like reinforcement to their side. Yi Shiwen nodded towards the two men, with a blade in his hand, and stared coldly towards the people of Chow family. For Yi Shiwen, only he himself knew about the life and death experience that he had just gone through, and his survival could be said as a narrow escape. Falling into magma pool implied certain death. The Houtian Jinshi simply couldn't stop the invasion of magma, and even Xiantian Jinshi would burn up quickly, so there was no way to continue to resist it. So, when he had fallen into the magma, he decided to swallow the root of blue flaming lotus at this critical moment, and along with it, he also took out the Xiantian pellet and began to forcefully impact on his inner state in order to enter into the Xiantian realm. Only after the impact to his innate state, an endless amount of Xiantian Jinqi generated inside his body, and he was able to escape. Yi Shiwen had no other ways to escape from the magma, and without a breakthrough, he would have burned inside the magma, but fortunately, heavens would not fail a man. Although he had only swallowed the root of blue flaming lotus, but his body had still gained the fire spirit characteristics. His anti-fire resistance had greatly enhanced, and this was the reason why the magma had not caused any injuries to his body, and he had been able to stay in the magma for so long, without getting burnt. Moreover, he also regarded this as a blessing in disguise, because from now on, flames would not be able to burn him due to greatly increased resistance to fire. Also, he would be able to practice a fire attribute power technique, and would gain twice the result with half the effort. This was the motive that had attracted all the warriors to come here. On Saturday, I will prepare a grand release of chapters, in the range of minimum 3 and can go up to 5 chapters, depending on the donations. Enjoy. Chapter 74. Thanks to Cy Puklubti, UK, Alexander Engblom, Sweden, Galen Kellner, US, Thomas Metzger, Pittsburgh, Elon Jones, Brooklyn, New York, James Pape, Arizona, Anonymous, Norway, Amir, Israel, for sponsoring the grand release of chapters 74, 75, 76 and 77. Chapter 74 All Killed. This was the most important characteristic of Blue Flaming Lotus that had attracted all the warriors to rush here. Because of the strong fire-resistant properties of the Blue Flaming Lotus, Yi Shiwen had been able to break through to the Xiantian realm while he was still inside the magma pool. Inside the magma, Yi Shiwen simply did not have any time to think, and his only chance of survival relied on having a breakthrough as soon as possible. After taking the Xiantian pellet, Yi Shiwen had been able to have a quick and successful breakthrough compared to the other masters, and this could be described as a narrow escape. When he had fallen into the magma pool, if his Xiantian Jinqi had been completely consumed even a moment before he actually swallowed the blue flaming lotus, then he would have instantly burned in the magma before gaining the fire-resistant ability from the lotus. However, after experiencing a narrow escape from death, it was not so that he didn't get any benefits from this. In his body, 50% of the Houtian Jinqi had transformed into Xiantian Jinqi, and this transformation was comparable to the degree of transformation attained by ordinary experts of the Xiantian third stage. Of course, his current transformation was still not comparable to the elite masters of Xiantian third stage who had already transformed 60% of their Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi. After entering into the Xiantian realm, Yi Zaiwen's strength had also reached all the way up to the strength of 11 dragons. Also, speaking of the martial arts techniques, although he knew a lot of Xiantian level martial arts techniques, but had only mastered to an extent of advanced power technique, and had only scratched the surface of the real extent related to the Xiantian power techniques. It could be said that he had obtained a superficial knowledge, as the insights, about these Xiantian power techniques. Although 50% of his Jinqi had already transformed into Xiantian Jinqi, but there was still a small gap between him and other Xiantian masters, who had also transformed 50% of their Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi. However, dealing with the Fire Lin beast, which had just entered into the Xiantian second stage, was a child's play for Yi Shiwen. And now that Yi Shiwen had entered into the Xiantian realm, once he would start practicing his Xiantian level power techniques, then he would be able to fight on equal terms with the ordinary masters of the Xiantian third stage. However, right now, he was still just a master of the Xiantian first stage, who had still not grasped his martial arts technique to the extent of Xiantian level. You actually did not die!" Chao Jinshui said with an astonished look in his eyes. "Thanks to you, I'm not dead," Yi Shiwen, with a calm smile on his face, said. "And I'm afraid that today, your Chao family will be exterminated." You little bastard, how dare you threaten me?" Chao Jinshui roared loudly. "Today I'll kill you!" Chao Jinshui roared and rushed towards Yi Shiwen and shot both his palms in succession, releasing a terrifying Jinqi, which endlessly stirred the air and the surrounding. Overconfident, Yi Shiwen sneered and instantly shot Rushing Thunder Hand. Although Rushing Thunder Hand was just a lower-level power technique, but in the hands of Yi Shiwen, it had reached a profound level, and even if he used to mainly practice Cold Moon Beheader, but he had not put down the Rushing Thunder Hand, because it was simple, quite handy, powerful, and with the conversion of half of his Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi, and accompanied with the strength of 11 dragons, how could a Xiantian expert like Chao Jinshui, who had transformed only 10% of this Jinqi into the Xiantian Jinqi, be his opponent? Boom! Yi Zaiwen's palm rumbled and released an intermittent thunderous explosion sound which echoed throughout the cave. Bang! With a heart-shaking breaking sound, all of the bones in Chao Jinshui's arm had been instantly broken under the terrifying strength of 11 dragons, present in Yi Zaiwen's attack, that had instantly turned the bones present in Chao Jinshui's arm into powder. Ah! Chao Jinshui screamed while his body had been sent flying upside down by the terrifying force present in Yi Zaiwen's attack that had also injured his internal organs. How is this possible? Everyone was stunned after watching this scene, because no one thought that a Xiantian master like Chao Jinshui would be unable to stop even a single palm attack from Yi Shiwen. But Yi Shiwen had just now entered into the Xiantian realm, then how had his strength increased so much? However, it was obvious that Yi Shiwen did not intend to show mercy on him. His long blade instantly chopped out a crescent-shaped bladiki towards Chao Jinshui and split him in half in the midair. "Jinshui!" Chao Jinbiao indignantly roared. "I'll kill you!" Seeing his younger brother getting killed right in front of his eyes, it seemed as if Chao Jinbiao had become totally insane and frantic and suddenly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. However, at this time, the Fire Lin beast also rushed towards Yi Shiwen and spit out high-temperature flames from its mouth at him. From the other side, Chao Xing also rushed towards Yi Shiwen. They must kill Yi Shiwen because if they did not kill him, then the news about their conspiracy would leak out and numerous angry forces would come to destroy Chao family. Yi Shiwen sneered and took out his long blade, and in just a step, his figure suddenly disappeared. Now that he had become a Xiantian master, not only just half of his Jinqi had transformed into the Xiantian Jinqi, but his strength and speed had also progressed by leaps and bounds. Breaking through to the Xiantian realm could be considered as the first big transformation for a martial artist, and it caused a tremendous change in the physical body as well. Shua! Yishuan instantly appeared in front of the Fire Lin beast, then stretched out his left hand and directly squeezed the hot flames spit out by the Fire Lin beast, and his right fist instantly punched out, with the Xiantian Jinqi attached to the top of the fist, and instantly condensed into a terrifying Quan Jin and fiercely smashed into its head. Although the speed of Fire Lin beast was very fast from the start, and after consuming the blue flaming lotus, its speed had increased even further, but it still could not avoid Yi Zaiwen's fist. Bang! The scales on the face of the Fire Lin beast had immediately shattered by Yi Zaiwen's punch. Boom! The gigantic body of the Fire Lin beast flew up again, and severely hit at the top of a rock, generating a tremendous impulse which directly crushed its bones. It rolled on to one side while wailing incessantly. Right then, while Yi Zaiwen's attention was diverted towards the beast, Chao Jinbiao thought of this as an opportunity, and his figure suddenly appeared behind Yishuan with a trace of madness in his eyes. Chao Jinbiao was carrying a spear which instantly shot out like a shadow of a dragon, suffused with a terrifying undulation, and instantly advanced towards Yishuan. Smack! It seemed as if Yishuan had eyes on his back as well. He instantly turned around and grabbed the spear with one hand. Bang! After catching the spear so effortlessly, Yishuan took a step and instantly appeared in front of Chao Jinbiao and slapped a palm on his chest. Bang! Chao Jinbiao solidly suffered a direct hit on his chest from Yi Zaiwen's palm, but he didn't possess the incredible defense of the Fire Lin beast, and the strength of 11 dragons directly blasted into his chest and instantly turned his internal organs into mincemeat. He died a violent death in a flash. It took a long time to explain all of this, but it had all happened very fast, and at this time, the last remaining Xiantian master of the Chao family, Chao Xing, had become terrified of Yishuan after he had seen the 2 other Xiantian masters of his family getting killed so easily at the hands of a Yishuan, who had just entered into the Xiantian realm. This was something incomprehensible to him. However, at this time, it was too late to escape. Yishuan instantly threw the spear with such an incredible strength that it immediately reached Chao Xing and pierced his body, and the immense force present in Yi Zaiwen's throw directly carried Chao Xing, along with the spear, into the magma where he instantly burned to charcoal. Chapter 75. NT, thanks to Cy Puklupti, UK, Alexander Engblom, Sweden, Galen Kellner, US, Thomas Metzger, Pittsburgh, Elon Jones, Brooklyn, New York, James Pape, Arizona, Anonymous, Norway, Amir, Israel, for sponsoring the grand release of chapters 74, 75, 76 and 77, chapter 75 Eon main sect in a very short period of time. The Fire Lin beast had been crippled, and the 3 Xiantian masters of the Chao family had all been killed single-handedly by Yishuan. The sudden turn of events had left all of the warriors dumbstruck, but at this time, those warriors realized that their lives had already been saved by Yishuan and shouted in succession out of happiness. Kill these Chao family bastards! They actually conspired to kill us! Kill them all! I will completely eradicate Chao family! After facing such a life and death situation, now, many warriors had survived because of the unexpected appearance of Yishuan, and this had boosted their morale. They were in high spirits, and without wasting any time, they roared and rushed towards the warriors of the Chao family, who were still mourning the deaths of their strongest experts. Yishuan did not say anything and arrived at the side of Fire Lin beast and lifted his blade in a stance. The Fire Lin beast had been crippled by a punch from Yishuan and couldn't even move. Yishuan finally stabbed his blade into its body and put it out of its miseries. Yishuan received the corpse of Fire Lin beast in his storage ring, as it had the blood of Fire Qilin in its body, and its whole body could be considered as a treasure, even though it had not fully matured before dying. However, if it had completely transformed into a fully grown Fire Lin beast, then Yishuan would have been unable to deal with it. When it had swallowed the blue flaming lotus, it had then entered into the growth period of rapid transformation, and if given enough time, it could have even reached the Xiantian's 6th stage in just 1 year. Fire Lin Beast had just entered the growth period, and after fully maturing, it would have become an absolutely terrifying demon beast in this locality, and would have brought disaster on everyone, but fortunately, before it could fully mature, it had been killed by Yishiwen. "Brother Yi, I didn't expect you to be all right," Dai Xiaohua came up and said. About those Hotian realm warriors of the Chao family, he simply didn't care because this incident had come to a closure along with deaths of the 3 Xiantian masters of the Chao family, and Fire Lin Beast, and killing these warriors of the Hotian realm would only be a waste of time. Although Chao family was on the verge of complete extinction, but those warriors were quite furious for being conspired against by the Chao family because they could have lost their lives pointlessly. Both sides had started to fight, but soon, Wu Xiaoyang also joined the battle, and once a Xiantian master like him joined the fray, immediately, this fight had turned into a one-sided massacre, and soon, Chao family warriors had been completely massacred. "Brother Yi, thanks for saving our lives today, and if I ever got an opportunity in the future, I would certainly return the favor," Wu Xiaoyang said. "I am going back and reveal this news to the public. Goodbye." Yishiwen nodded. After a while, everyone had left, leaving only Yishiwen and Dai Xiaohua behind in the cave, because those warriors had faced such a life-threatening experience in this cave and were reluctant to stay here. "Brother Yi, it is needless to say that I will return the favor, and if you ever need help with something, come find me in the Yuncheng city," Dai Xiaohua said while laughing. Yishiwen nodded, and though Dai Xiaohua had not said something pleasant to hear, but after spending time with him, Yishiwen had finally come to understand his character. Yishiwen knew that the words he just said seemed fancy, but they still were a lot more meaningful. Dai Xiaohua was still young and was an outstanding genius who had already entered the Xiantian realm, so how could he possibly not enter the city of Yunqing, which was a necessity for all the disciples of Dai family sect? "I think we will soon also be able to meet again," Dai Xiaohua laughed. "Looking at Brother Ye's talent, you would certainly be going to the Yiyuan main sect, and I am sure that very soon, you will become an outstanding disciple of the Yiyuan main sect, and when the time comes, we should be able to meet again in the meeting of the warriors of 4 great sects." "Meeting of the warriors of 4 great sects?" Yishiwen asked. "Brother Yi, you don't know that the 4 great sects of our Yu state jointly holds the meeting of outstanding warriors, including some well-known figures coming from all over Great Yu state," Dai Xiaohua said. "Sometimes the masters of the royal family also join in. In short, the competition is going to be very fierce, but I think the strength of Brother Yi is more than enough and standing out won't be an issue for you." Yishiwen did not ask anything more because right now, he had not even entered into the main sect, so there were a lot of things that he still did not know about, but once he entered into the main sect, then these things won't remain hidden from his eyes, and he would eventually come to know about them. "Then I'll say goodbye. I must rush toward Yuncheng City, you know. This time I secretly ran out on my own and did not go along with my team," Dai Xiaohua said. The 4 big sects of the Great Yu state were located at the 4 corners of the state, each in the east, west, north and south direction, which worked as the 4 gateways and supported the state. Yiyuan main sect was located in the west direction, and Qifeng Mountains Yiyuan School was located further in the southwest, although separated by a large distance. But one could travel this distance in 1 day by riding a flight-type demon beast. But Yuncheng City was located in the northern part of Great Yu State, and even by riding on a flight-type demon beast, it would take half a month time. Therefore this time, Dai Xiaohua was in a lot of tension compared to Yishiwen. "And I'm sure we'll meet again someday." Yishiwen nodded. After bidding farewell to Dai Xiaohua, Yishiwen began to travel alone. 2 months' time passed in a blink of an eye. The large entrance to the Yiyuan main sect was located in the western part of Yu State, and when Yishiwen arrived there, he saw that it was completely bustling with people, who had arrived from more than 100 sub-schools. These people were actually the geniuses from all over the Yu State, as well as many visitors who had come along with them. And like Yishiwen, they had come to enter into the Yiyuan main sect. So this is the Yuan main sect where the genius disciples from various Yuan sub-schools come to study. Yishiwen looked from afar and saw dozens of miles away, an endless mountain range of 10 huge mountains that looked like the mountains of immortals, and resembled a sacred mountainous region. Each and every one of those mountain peaks were so high, as if they were piercing the sky itself, covered with clouds and mist curling around the mountains. Countless waterfalls were traversing horizontally down those mountains, and it appeared as if the galaxies were falling from the seventh heaven. Among these endless mountains, a palace could be seen, rising steeply from the level ground, and well blended with the surrounding environment, which seemed to resemble the nature itself. The most spectacular thing was that in the depth of the mountain range, several palaces could be seen in a row, visibly floating above the tall peaks, and the whole scenery looked like a city in the mountains. Yishiwen was amazed at the scene which had unfolded in front of him. It clearly resembled a paradise, and compared with the landscape and environment present in the Yuan main sect, Qingfeng Mountain's environment was nothing. And that was the reason why many experts would rather come to these great sects. Coming to the main sect was similar to living in a paradise on the earth, which was going to be a unique experience for Yishiwen, who had come from a different world. Even from dozens of miles away, Yishiwen could clearly feel the intermittent waves of strong and rich lingqi present in the wind, which was very important for cultivating. With each blow of air on his face and with each breath he took, he would feel 100 vessels opening inside his body, giving a comfortable feeling to him. Yishiwen didn't know that how many spiritual veins had been buried in these mountains by the main sect to make the air so rich in lingqi. If practiced here, then he would certainly gain twice the result with half the effort. Chapter 76. NT, thanks to Cy Puklubti, UK, Alexander Engblom, Sweden, Galen Kellner, US, Thomas Metzger, Pittsburgh, Elon Jones, Brooklyn, New York, James Pape, Arizona, Anonymous, Norway, Amir, Israel, for sponsoring the grand release of chapters 74, 75, 76 and 77. Chapter 76 Senior Discipleship. No wonder that main sect had chosen such a place as its base, because even with low qualifications and talent, it was possible to enter into the Xiantian realm with little practice. Moreover, the disciples of Yuan sub-schools, although one could not say that all were peerless geniuses, but their qualifications were still not so bad. And once the disciples of the Hotian ninth stage would enter into the main sect, they would be able to break through to the Xiantian realm within few years. If practiced in the environment of sub-schools, then they would be able to step into the Xiantian realm by the time they reached the age of 30 years old. Resources and environment of the sub-schools and main sect varied greatly. Although the difference was only a few years to enter into the Xiantian realm, but practicing for entering into the Xiantian realm inside the main sect and practicing for the same without entering the main sect were not the same things. The difference was only a few years, but the gap between them was already very big, because without competition and proper environment for cultivation, there was a high possibility for this gap to widen. Those who had already entered the Xiantian realm before entering into the main sect were the so-called seed disciples, who would immediately receive various resources from the Yuan main sect to ensure that they should be able to have a rapid increase in their cultivation in a short time. This was also the biggest attraction for all of the geniuses, and many schools would send their genius disciples to practice in the main sect. And since these disciples were already considered geniuses from their respective schools, and once they would practice in the favorable environment of the main sect, then they would definitely get stronger. That is why the disciples passing out of the main sect or other 4 big sects of the Great Yu State were never weak. Yishiwen had some mixed feelings about this, because he had just arrived at the main sect and he didn't know about the strength level of other geniuses, who had also come this year, and he also didn't know how much they had already practiced, and how much they would progress after practicing in the favorable environment of main sect. He knew that things were going to be tough from this point onwards, and he needed to work hard to surpass others. After thinking about it, Yishiwen felt a kind of passionate feeling building inside his heart, because now, these formidable opponents would become a driving force for his cultivation. However, right now, the first thing to do was to find the people of the Qingfeng Mountains Yuan school. Suddenly, from the sky, a giant demon bird descended down, and standing on its top was a decent-looking man. He smiled towards Yishuin and said, "Younger brother, you should be this year's new disciple from a sub-school, right?" "I am." Yishuin nodded. "Brother is very talented, so young, and you are already a master of the Xiantian realm, and presumably also a seed disciple." The man laughed and said, "My name is Shuri, and I am an inner disciple." "Greeting, brother Shuri, I am Yishuin," Yishuin said, and he could easily see through the depth of Shuri's breath and knew that he was completely harmless, but his cultivation had already reached a very high level because unlike other Xiantian experts, who also contained a part of non-converted Houtian Jinshi in their bodies, his breath was already complete and rich, as if he had already become one with the nature. Yishuin concluded that Shuri was definitely a master of Xiantian 5th stage, and he could be among the top inner disciples. Of course, there was no comparison between the strength of core disciples of the main sect and the core disciples of the Qifeng Mountain, because the core disciples from the main sect could go to the sub-schools and become their head, or sovereign. This was the difference. "Brother Yi, do you want to go inside?" Shuri said. "If you want, you may come up and I'll give you a ride." "It is greatly appreciated, brother. I am a disciple of the Qifeng Mountain Ziyuan school, and I don't know where they are because I did not come along with them," Yishuin said. "I know where people from different sub-schools live. Come on, I'll take you there," Shuri said. "Thank you." Yishuin jumped upon the back of the demon bird, and although he had not ridden demon birds, but he knew about how to do it. He immediately concentrated an influx of Jinqi at the soles of his feet and firmly adsorbed on the demon bird's back. "Go!" Shuri shouted, and the demon bird quickly moved, waving its huge wings, flying into the clouds. Suddenly Yishuin felt like the wind was blowing and stinging on his skin like blades made of air. But fortunately, Yishuin had covered his whole body with Xiantian Jinqi, and therefore did not feel anything. This demon bird was so fast that in a moment, they had already reached the inner parts of the Yiyuan main sect, and he could not help but feel amazed at the beauty of this place, and sighed with emotion. After careful examination, he saw tens of mountain peaks that were so high that the several palaces, atop these peaks, looked like starry sky from below. After Shuri's explanation, Yishuin found out that these 10 enormous peaks represented 10 branch veins of the Yiyuan school, and legend said that in the past, the founder of the Yiyuan school had handed over these 10 branch veins to 10 of his best disciples. The first 10 mountain peaks were now governed by people of the Yiyuan school, holding the reins of the main sect. Meanwhile, their strength was also unpredictable, and all of them were Zhendao experts, possessing strengths even more terrifying than the masters of the Xiantian realm, and to what extent, even Shuri didn't know. Yishuin knew that Zhendao masters were considered the authentic disciples of the Yiyuan main sect, and they also possessed terrifying strength, capable enough to kill any experts of the Xiantian realm easily. Even in such a big influential sect like the Yiyuan main sect, there were only around 100 Zhendao experts. Besides first 10 leaders and those other Zhendao disciples, in the Yiyuan school, the disciples were divided into inner sect disciples, core disciples, and outer sect disciples. With the vast resources offered by the Yiyuan main sect to the inner sect disciples, they would be able to break into the Xiantian realm in just few years, so the number of inner sect disciples was always more compared to that of outer sect disciples. In fact, number of inner sect disciples would be the largest of about 50,000, followed by core sect disciples and least number of outer sect disciples. Yishuin had gained a direct insight into the true strength of Yiyuan main sect, because having thousands of Xiantian warriors was really incredible for a sect. Shuri told Yishuin that the new disciples from the sub-schools would go through the examination, and there, it will be decided which peak they would go to. And during the examination, if one was to give an outstanding performance, then there was a chance to get selected to study under the elder, which was a great honor for the disciple, and his status would also increase. In a very short span of time, the demon bird flew closer to the settlements of the disciples. NT. I will release Chapter 77 in few hours. Chapter 77. NT. Thanks to Sai Puklubti, UK, Alexander Engblom, Sweden, Galen Kellner, US, Thomas Metzger, Pittsburgh, Elon Jones, Brooklyn, New York, James Pape, Arizona, Anonymous, Norway, Amir, Israel, for sponsoring the grand release of chapters 74, 75, 76 and 77, chapter 77 Bullying. This is the courtyard for disciple of Qifeng Mountains Yuan School. I will leave you here. The wings of the demon bird closed down, and it descended on a mountain peak. This mountain peak was located in the more remote area, but several buildings were present on it. The disciples of other sub-schools were also concentrated on several other mountain peaks, although somewhat far away in the remote areas because main sect valued strength, and it was obvious that disciples from the sub-school would be weaker compared to disciples of the main sect. Thank you. Yishuan climbed up the stairs and quickly arrived at the hillside where the courtyard for disciples of Qifeng Mountains Yuan School was located. Yishuan had not reached the top yet, when he heard a loud voice. How can you do this? This is our Qifeng Mountain Yuan School's courtyard. You cannot just barge in and occupy our place. Yishuan heard the voice of the only female top-core disciple of Qifeng Mountains Yuan School, Qianwanru. Hey, why not? We have more people and you have so few, a total of only 20. So what if we want to occupy your courtyard? You have come from a small countryside school and you don't need this much space, but this time, our Shaoyang Yuan School has sent 50 people, so you separate out 2/3 of this courtyard and give it to us. This is not right, because this is the place where all of our forefathers from Qifeng Mountain Yuan School once lived and practiced. Why must we give this to you? I tell you what, let's decide with our strengths. An arrogant voice resounded in the courtyard. Yishuan rapidly climbed up the steps and after reaching the top, he soon saw a group of approximately 30 young people, surrounding the disciples of the Qifeng Mountain Yuan School in the courtyard. Shaoyang Yuan School. Yishuan frowned at the name of this school. This name, for Yishuan, was definitely not strange because Shaoyang Yuan School and Qifeng Mountain Yuan School had been hostile towards each other for God knows how many years. This enmity between these two sub-schools started in the ancient era and no one knew the reason behind it. However, after so many years of holding grudges and hatred towards each other, there was nothing that could be done to stop this clash between the two sub-schools. Two groups were confronting each other where one belonged to the Qifeng Mountain, about 20 in number and all over the middle Hotian 9th stage and were being led by Zhang Yang, Qianwanru and Wu Hao. Among them, Zhang Yang had already entered into the Xiantian realm and had transformed 10% of his Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi, while Qianwanru and Wu Hao had both reached the peak of Hotian 9th stage. The group on the other side belonged to the Shaoyang Yuan School, headed by a young guy who currently had a sneer on his face. He was also a Xiantian first stage master, but with his 20% Jinqi already transformed into Xiantian Jinqi, he was a lot stronger than Zhang Yang. Qifeng Mountain Yuan School this year's core disciples really had relatively mediocre strength. Huiqing, do not go too far with the bullying. At this time, Wu Hao spoke. Bullying? You call that bullying? Ha ha, a moment ago, that guy called Yifeng, who was supposed to be the most powerful disciple from your school, easily collapsed in front of me. He is lucky that I almost stopped myself from wasting his cultivation, Huiqing said with a complacent smile on his face. In the back of the crowd, Yifeng's complexion suddenly changed. So, that was the reason why Yishuan had not seen him in the crowd because he had already been wounded. Yi Zaiwen's complexion suddenly changed. In this entire world, he loved his family the most, and someone had dared to touch a member of his family, and by doing so he had also invited the wrath of the emperor. Fuck off! Yishuan shouted. Yi Zaiwen's shout had immediately caused commotion among the disciples of the Shaoyang Yuan School when they saw a 17-year-old boy was ferociously looking at them. Yishuan! When Zhang Yang saw Yishuan, a sudden happiness bloomed on his face. It's Brother Yi! Brother Yi! All of the disciples of the Qifeng Mountain Yuan School had an expression of surprise on their faces when they suddenly saw Yishuan, and now they felt relaxed because now they knew that they had survived this crisis, because in the present situation, even Zhang Yang and Yifeng, the two Xiantian masters had been unable to do anything, but in their hearts, they had already accepted Yi Shiwen as their leader. After all, months ago, Yi Shiwen had easily beheaded a Xiantian master, although at that time, Lu Ji's strength had not been that much, and his transformation of Xiantian Jinshi was inferior compared to the current Jinshi transformation of Zhang Yang and Yi Feng. But Yi Shiwen was also only a Hotian realm warrior back then, and had still been able to behead a Xiantian master like Lu Ji. Moreover, Yi Shiwen had also received Xiantian Dan and Blood Yuan fruit like Yi Feng and Zhang Yang, so it was easy to guess that he would definitely have entered into the Xiantian realm, and his previous tyrannical strength would have become even more tyrannical. Indeed, as they had thought, in the last 2 months, Yi Shiwen's strength had progressed by leaps and bounds, and he had become tyrannically powerful, even though he was still at the Xiantian first stage. He had fully consolidated his inner state within the Xiantian realm at the first stage, and half of his Jinqi had completely transformed into Xiantian Jinqi. He had experienced breakthroughs in all of his Xiantian level martial arts techniques, where he had reached the peak of first layer of Tyrant Body Technique, which made his slim body to contain a total strength of 19 dragons. And now that he had reached the peak of transformation of 50% Jinqi into the Xiantian Jinqi, he could even contend with the Xiantian third stage experts, and the most important thing was that the now ordinary warriors of the Xiantian third stage wouldn't be able to injure him. He had finally reached the peak of the Xiantian part of Celestial Step, and in just 2 months, his speed had nearly doubled compared to the speed he had while fighting the Fire Lin Beast. Changing muscles, shrinking bones technique had been practiced to the Xiaoqing realm, and even while standing beside a Xiantian master, Yi Shiwen could not be discovered and would even be able to change his appearance. He had achieved the best benefits in the Cold Moon Beheader, and had actually practiced the Full Moon Beheader to the Deshang realm. Only the progress was not much for Coiling Dragon Palm, which was such a difficult martial art to practice that Yi Shiwen could only grasp a little more knowledge about its first move. Hidden Dragon Rising from the Abyss. Now only the masters of the Xiantian third stage who had transformed 60% of their Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi could pose a threat to him. But with such advancements in his strength, the price naturally was very large. After entering into the Xiantian realm, the low-grade spirit stones consumption had increased dramatically, and almost all of the spirit stones he possessed had already been burnt in the last 2 months. And now, low-grade spirit stone were simply not good enough for practicing Xiantian techniques, so he could only use spirit stones, which were quite expensive. In other words, Yi Shiwen had once again become poor. NT, with this chapter, I conclude the grand release for Saturday, though it dragged on a bit, but you will still get 2 chapters, chapter 78 and 79, on Sunday, so enjoy. Laughing Face, NT. Also, I may release GSI Chapter 4 Sunday, depending on my schedule for MGS releases, but I cannot promise right now. Raised so far, $68, 227%. Queue cleared for Chapter 78. Chapter 79 will be a regular release for Sunday along with sponsored Chapter 78. Chapter 78. NT. Thanks to Thomas Edwards, New Zealand, Samantha Weaver, New Zealand, and Jan Henrik Dux, Germany, for sponsoring this chapter. Chapter 78. Like a dead dog, however, Yi Shiwen was quite used to his special way of cultivation, and he needed to arrange for surplus spirit stones to continue practicing in the special space. After entering into the Xiantian realm, the crazy consumption rate of spirit stones had led to a rapid increase in his strength and speed, to a terrifying extent. People of Shaoyang Yuan School were also giving somewhat strange looks to Yi Shiwen, because they did not know why disciples of Qingfeng Mountain Yuan School looked so overjoyed after the sudden appearance of this young man. "Who are you?" Hu Cheng asked. "Qingfeng Mountain Yuan School's Yi Shiwen," Yi Shiwen indifferently said. "Who wounded my brother?" "It was him, that Hu Cheng." "Yes, it was him," many of the disciples of Qifeng Mountain Yuan School immediately said while pointing towards Hu Cheng. "So what if it was me?" Hu Cheng looked at Yi Shiwen with disdain and said, "Are you that Yi Feng's younger brother?" That Yi Feng is a guy with an undeserved reputation and mediocre strength, that's all he is, Hu Qing said indifferently. NT, with an undeserved reputation, idiom, unwarranted fame. You are just an ignorant dog who has actually dared to venture into our territory. Yi Shiwen looked maliciously at Hu Qing and said. At this time, the conflict between the two sub-schools had also attracted many onlookers consisting mainly of disciples living on the neighboring mountain peaks. Both Qifeng Mountain and Shaoyang Yuan schools were one of a dozen or more sub-schools, and the disciples from these sub-schools had settled on dozens of mountain peaks. Although more than a dozen mountain peaks were occupied by the disciples of these sub-schools, but for the entire Yuan school, this was still a small and insignificant area and nothing more. The key figures of Yuan school, the elders, the high-ranked disciples and others, all of them had their own separate mountain peak as personal domain. It was difficult to imagine how big Yuan school actually was. You actually dared to abuse me! Hu Qing shouted with an angry look on his face. Abused? That was just the beginning, because now I will beat the crap out of you! Yi Shiwen sneered, and in just a step, using celestial step, he arrived in front of Hu Qing in a flash. Did you think you can just come here and run wildly and no one will punish you? Yi Shiwen mercilessly shot his big hand towards the face of Hu Qing. Until a moment ago, Hu Qing had been feeling triumphed when he suddenly saw Yi Zaiwen's hand coming towards him. He wanted to dodge but simply couldn't because Yi Zaiwen's speed was incredibly fast, almost like a whirlwind, and in an instant Yi Zaiwen's hand had approached Hu Qing's face. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's big hand slapped maliciously on the face of Hu Qing. He suddenly screamed and spat out a mouthful of blood, and along with that, some of his teeth flew out. All the people present there had their jaws dropped. They knew about Hu Qing's strength because being able to convert 20% of Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi was rare for masters at such a young age. However, this Yi Shiwen was simply too terrifying. His palm was so fast that Hu Qing had been unable to dodge it, and had suffered a severe slap on the face. Moreover, from the look on Yi Zaiwen's face, it seemed as if he hadn't put any effort at all. Shaoyang Yuan School's disciples broke out in cold sweat, and Qifeng Mountain Yuan School's disciples were cheering for Yi Shiwen because his strength really had become even more unfathomable and tyrannical. You! Hu Qing looked at Yi Shiwen with a look of disbelief. What you? Yi Shiwen again slapped him on the other side of his face, and suddenly, a few more teeth went flying out. There was a huge difference between their strengths. Although Hu Qing could be considered as an outstanding genius in the crowd of this year's disciples, who had already transformed 20% of his Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi. If he had faced someone else, then he would not be so miserable, but to his bad luck, he had dared to provoke Yi Shiwen. I'll kill you! Hu Qing was extremely furious in his heart and mind, because from infancy to adulthood, he had always been called a cultivation genius and had already gained fame at a young age by getting attention from everyone, but just now, he had received such humiliation. Both of his eyes had reddened, and one could see hatred for Yi Shiwen in his eyes, who had humiliated him in front of such a large crowd, consisting of disciples from many sub-schools. When he had come to bully the disciples of Qifeng Mountain Yuan School, Hu Qing never thought that he himself would be bullied instead. Hu Qing drew out his sword blade, and it brandished a dazzling sword light that instantly rushed towards Yi Shiwen with lightning speed. NT, Hu Qing's weapon is a jianshan, which is a sword blade, although Hu Qing did not have the strength to hit back in front of tyrannical Yi Shiwen, and had been slapped twice that had made him face such a disgrace in front of everyone. But he was strong and was indeed a genius of Shaoyang Yuan School, and at this time, the strength of a master of peak Xiantian first stage completely unleashed in this sword attack. Yi Shiwen sneered and used rushing thunder hand to instantly grasp Hu Qing's sword blade. Dang! A loud metal clashing sound resounded everywhere, and Yi Shiwen actually firmly grabbed Hu Qing's sword blade in his hand. Bang dang! Bang dang! Bang dang! Yi Shiwen kneaded that sword blade as if it was made up of clay, and its size decreased section by section. After entering into the Xiantian realm and practicing tyrant body technique to such a profound level, not only his strength had increased dramatically, but the toughness of his body had also increased to such an extent that now, it had become difficult for weapons like spears and swords to hurt him. Yi Shiwen kneaded the sword blade along with the sword key and directly snapped it. How is this possible? Hu Cheng simply couldn't believe his eyes when his sword blade snapped in the grip of Yi Ziwen's hand. Yi Shiwen sneered, and without giving any chance to Hu Cheng, he rushed like an azure dragon rising out of the abyss and instantly trod on his chest. Bang! Hu Cheng couldn't respond, and his body was sent flying like a broken kite, upside down, directly towards the several disciples of Shaoyang Yuan's school with such a forceful impact that made them to fly out, and most of them fainted immediately. Get the hell out of here! With a cold look in his eyes, Yi Shiwen said, You absolutely cannot barge into this place because it belongs to our Qingfeng Mountain Yuan school, keep that in mind. All of the disciples of Shaoyang Yuan school were giving angry looks to Yi Shiwen, but did not dare to say anything. After all, a powerful Xiantian master like Hu Cheng had been beaten so easily, and they were not even in the Xiantian realm. So, how could they dare to say anything to a tyrannical Xiantian master like Yi Shiwen? Although they were at the peak of Hotian 9th stage and Xiantian realm was only one step across, but the difference was like heaven and earth between the Hotian realm and Xiantian realm. At this time, the disciples of other Yuan schools started talking about Yi Shiwen among themselves. Who is he? Why haven't I seen him before? Quite fierce, that Hu Cheng was definitely not weak, but he still couldn't hit back like a dead dog. NT. Regular release of Chapter 79 in few hours. I would suggest those who live in a time zone where it's already night to go to bed because it may take time. Chapter 79. NT. This chapter is a regular release. Chapter 79 Father becomes the ancestor. I never thought that there was actually such a fierce man in Qifeng Mountain Sub-School. Right, Qifeng Mountain Sub-School is located in the remote areas of Great Yu State, and rarely produces any powerful masters, but I never expected to see such an incredible master, originating from there. Gee, it seems like things are going to be interesting because their genius has been defeated so easily and Shaoyang Sub-School won't easily forget about this. Yes, I heard that the Shaoyang Sub-School also has a very strong genius and his strength is close to the strengths of several seed disciples. What is that guy called again? He is called Wen Shiyang. Yes, that's it, Wen Shiyang. Except those few seeds disciples, he can be considered a very powerful master. Gee, I did not expect Qifeng Mountain Sub-School to have such a fierce character like him. He definitely didn't use his full strength against Hu Cheng, and I am sure that when the time comes, we will get to see his true strength. Seeing that people of Shaoyang Sub-School had started to leave, Yi Shiwen did not stay there for too long and ran towards the inner courtyard. After entering the inner courtyard, he asked, What the hell is going on? How did these bastards dare to bully our people? Zhan Yang looked at Yi Shiwen with a baffled look in his eyes. Yi Shiwen had become even more powerful than the last time, and earlier, Zhan Yang had been able to see through his cultivation level, but now, he absolutely couldn't see it at all. Although originally, Yi Shiwen always had a superior fighting strength and had also beheaded a Xiantian master, but at that time, he was still in the Hotian realm and his cultivation was visible to others. But now that he had transformed half of his Jinqi into the Xiantian Jinqi, his inner state had easily surpassed Zhan Yang, who had only transformed 10% of his Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi. Although Yi Shiwen was still in the Xiantian first stage, but his fighting strength was comparable to a master of Xiantian third stage. All of this had occurred in a few months' time, and if he had not personally seen it, he probably would not have believed it. Few months ago, he had heard from Yi Feng about his young brother that he was just a master of Hotian third stage, and was not even qualified to become a core disciple, but in these few months, he completely changed. But anyway, Yi Shiwen was also a disciple of Qifeng Mountain Sub-School, and the stronger he would be, the better for the reputation of their school. This is not the first time. We have been dealing with those guys from Shaoyang Sub-School for days, and each time, they come looking for a fight with new and ridiculous excuses. This time, they wanted to occupy our place. That's really outrageous. Zhang Yang said in an angry tone. This was obviously a case of Shaoyang Subschool's subterfuge because this mountain peak was so big that it could accommodate even 500 disciples at once, so all they were trying to do was nothing more than finding a pretext to come and bully us. Before, I was not present here and your elder brother had an argument with them and they injured him. Zhang Yang explained. Them? There was someone else? Yishuan asked. Yes, if it was only that Huqing, then your brother with 20% transformed Xiantian Jinqi was enough to handle him. Although, Huqing's 20% Xiantian Jinqi transformation was superior to your brother, but he would still have been able to protect himself. The main reason behind his injuries was the strongest disciple of Shaoyang Sub-School, called Wen Shiyang, who is already a master of Xiantian's second stage. He was the one who seriously wounded your brother. I came back and saw that Huqing was about to destroy your brother's cultivation and rescued your brother. By that time, Wen Shiyang had already left. Zhang Yang explained the matter to Yishuan. What? Yishuan did not know that they were going to destroy Yifeng's cultivation, otherwise he would not have showed mercy to Huqing by only injuring him with a kick. He would never have allowed him to get away so easily. However, it was really amazing that Yifeng had not only entered into Xiantian realm, but he could transform 20% of his Jinqi into the Xiantian Jinqi in such a short time of 3 months. Excellent natural talent, but their school had issued a Xiantian pellet to them very late, unlike other sub-schools where they gave Xiantian pellets to train some geniuses, years before sending them to the main sect. When Qifeng Mountain Sub-School had inquired, they found out that many disciples had already entered into the Xiantian realm and other sub-schools, and even without the resources, Yifeng had achieved the same feat by taking the same time for breaking through to the Xiantian realm. So, considering the natural talent of Yifeng, his breaking through to the Xiantian second stage was not surprising for Yishuan. But anyway, under the tilt of the main sect and its abundant resources, the advantages of the using resources for cultivation in the last few years could be regarded as nothing. When Yishuan heard that Yifeng had been wounded and had almost lost his cultivation, he suddenly became furious. In order to bully the disciples of Qifeng Mountain Sub-School, they were willing to go as far as destroying someone's cultivation. This time, Shaoyang Sub-School had really crossed the line. Who is the elder sent for escorting our school's group to main sect? Where is he right now? Yishuan asked, because in general, these sub-school disciples would not go alone to the main sect and the elders would accompany them inside the school. One reason was to protect them from any accident the way to main sect, and secondly, also to protect them from getting bullied in the main sect. This was the world which followed the rule of might is right, and strength was the only parameter that measured everything. And the other reason was that these sub-schools would exploit their connections with their disciples in the future. Although now, they studied in the main sect, but human relations could be useful to a great extent, and when these disciples would become high-level experts, or key figures in the main sect, they would then become the biggest backers for these sub-schools. This time, Ancestor Lin has come with us, Zhang Yang said. Ancestor Lin? Yishuan asked in surprise. How could the ancestor personally escort them, because it was never expected of an ancestor to personally escort the disciples to the main sect, as it was the job of an elder. I see you left early, so you do not know. Ancestor Lin Zhantian has already retired and the new ancestor of Qifeng Mountain Yuan School is your father, Zhang Yang said. What? Yishuan was startled. So, he only left for a few months and such a big change took place in the school where his father actually became the ancestor of Qifeng Mountain Yuan School. Although Yi Kongming was originally an elder, but the status of an elder or an ancestor could never be same. The status of the ancestors of sub-schools was comparable to that of the true disciples of the main sect, and his father had directly been promoted from the position of an elder to that of an ancestor. 1 month ago, Ancestor Lin resigned and has come to the main sect for debriefing, Zhang Yang explained. Where is the Ancestor Lin right now? Yishuan asked. Raised so far $38, 127%. Monday, Chapter 80 will come as a regular release along with sponsored Chapter 81. Tuesday, Chapter 82 will come as sponsored chapter Q cleared for sponsored chapter 81, 100%. Q status for sponsored chapter 82, 27%. Chapter 80. NT, this chapter is a regular release. Sponsored chapter 81 will come in few hours. Chapter 80 dropping in. To fight in the normal course of events, he ought to be here to protect them. But now at such a critical time, they actually could not find him. If Lin Jiantian was here at that time, then all of this would never have happened, and Yi Feng would not have been seriously injured by them. About this, we do not know where the ancestor Lin is right now. When ancestor had just arrived, he was summoned, and not just him, elders of other sub-schools were summoned as well. Zhang Yang said, although at this time, the position of their sub-school's ancestor had been taken over by Yi Kongming, but since his childhood, Zhang Yang had been using the term ancestor to refer Lin Jiantian, and therefore, suddenly changing his habit of calling him ancestor was somewhat difficult for him. Also, no one would go to tangle over such a trivial matter. It seems like something happened, and that's why they were called on a short notice. While talking to Zhang Yang, Yi Shiwen entered the room and glimpsed at Yi Feng, who was lying on the bed. His complexion looked pale and his breath was also intermittent, and Yi Rushua was on his side, taking care of him at the moment. Yi Shiwen had not seen Yi Rushua for last 3 months, and right now, he noticed that her breath was still firmly fixed on the peak Hotian 9th stage, and there seemed to be a thin line, and once she broke through this line, then she would be able to break through to the Xiantian realm. And with the help of Yi Zaiwen's Xiantian pellet that he had left for her, this was only a matter of time. According to Yi Zaiwen's judgment, Yi Ruxia's strength had already stayed at the peak of Hotian 9th stage for some time and had fully consolidated, and there was a high possibility that she might experience a breakthrough this month and enter into the Xiantian realm. Brother, sister! Yi Shiwen strode inside. Little brother, you are back! Yi Feng noticed Yi Shiwen coming inside and smiled, but he had suffered serious injuries and suddenly, his face twitched. Brother, you must avenge our elder brother. That one Shi Yang and Hui Qing went simply too far. Yi Rushua indignantly said. Yi Shiwen also remembered that in his memories, when he was small and would often get bullied for being weak, both Yi Feng and Yi Rushua would always come to his rescue, and therefore, the bond among 3 siblings had always been extremely strong. Although there was no blood relation between Yi Shiwen and the other 2, but the 3 of them were more intimate than blood-related brothers and sisters. Junior sister Yi, since you were inside the room, you missed the fight where brother Yi directly humiliated Hui Qing in front of everyone and tidied him up like a dead dog. At this time, Wu Hao answered for Yi Shiwen. Really? Yi Rushua said with a surprised look on her face, but she was also worried for her younger brother. Now Yi Shiwen had been recognized by everyone as Qifeng Mountain Sub-School's strongest disciple, and Yi Feng was the second. If they could come to beat Yi Feng, then Yi Shiwen would naturally be their next target. But according to Wu Hao's statement, Hui Qing had been defeated effortlessly by Yi Shiwen, and while Wu Hao was explaining things in detail, Yi Feng saw an indifferent look on Yi Zaiwen's face that made him resemble a person tired of war. It was not that he doubted Yi Zaiwen's strength, but thought that it was too inconceivable that Yi Shiwen had so easily tidied up that Hui Qing. If what Brother Wu said is right, then little brother, you have already vented my anger. Yi Feng grinned and said. Vent, it's still too early. Yi Shiwen coldly said. How can you possibly consider this matter as finished? Yi Shiwen's words were filled with killing intent. Originally, Yi Shiwen had counted on the elder who had come with the group to the main sect, but it seemed that he couldn't count on that at the moment. But when he heard that the elder of the Shaoyang sub-schools had also gone for the summons, he immediately had an idea that rather than asking someone else for help, he might as well just ask himself. Today, things might have gone worse if he had not arrived at a critical moment, and when Yi Shiwen watched Yi Feng lying on the bed, finding it difficult to move, he was even more infuriated. How could he possibly let them off? People of Shaoyang sub-school were waiting for a chance when their elder was not present, otherwise if he was present, then their plan to bully Qifeng Mountain sub-school would most likely have failed. Because their elder, sent to the main sect along with these elite disciples, was also an incredible master, and could easily deal with the Xiantian-level disciples as well. And today, when all of the elders had been summoned, the people of Shaoyang's sub-school immediately came to bully the people of Qifeng Mountain. They had obviously not come for taking over the courtyard, and it was purely an excuse to provoke the disciples of Qifeng Mountain sub-school and nothing more. Yi Shiwen pulled out a bottle of medicinal pellets from a storage ring. There were many bottles of medicinal pills inside the storage ring that he had got from the Xiantian master, Luo Tian, and these medicinal pills were good for injuries. Although Yi Shiwen had consumed most of the medicinal pills, but there were still some that he had saved for emergencies. After a dose of medicinal pills, Yi Feng's face immediately changed for better, and he seemed to get better. A warrior's body itself was very strong, not to mention, these medicinal pills belonged to a Xiantian master, Luo Tian. Yi Shiwen estimated that Yi Feng would be able to recover in 2 or 3 days and should be able to perform at full strength in the entrance examination hour. When Yi Shiwen saw that the condition of Yi Feng had considerably improved after consuming the pills, he gave out a sigh of relief and said, "Brother, you just wait and see how I take revenge for you and vent your anger. Today, these Shaoyang bastards dared to come and bully us, and if I do not teach them a lesson, then won't that ruin our Qifeng Mountain sub-school's reputation? And everyone would think of us as people from a weak sub-school." Yi Shiwen's words were deep and meant that only strong people commanded respect in this world and weak were regarded as fools. Competition was present everywhere, and it was especially very fierce among the sub-schools. Only a powerful person could command respect, and if Qifeng Mountain sub-school didn't respond to the provocation of Shaoyang sub-school, then it would definitely be regarded as a weak sub-school. So if someone tried to punch, it was necessary to punch back even harder to prove one's strength in this world. Teaching Shaoyang sub-school a lesson now was in the best interests of Qifeng Mountain sub-school. But this was just a secondary reason, and injuries of Yi Feng were the main reason why Yi Shiwen was so fixated on punishing those bullies of Shaoyang sub-school. Yi Shiwen ascertained the location of Shaoyang sub-school's courtyard and immediately went out, followed by many disciples of Qifeng Mountain sub-school. Shaoyang sub-school's courtyard was located not far from the Qifeng Mountain sub-school's courtyard, and only after a while, Yi Shiwen was standing in front of Shaoyang sub-school. Yi Shiwen stepped forward and shouted, "Wen Shiyang, get your ass over here!" Yi Ziwen's voice spread out along with a terrifying zhenqi throughout the courtyard, causing many nearby Shaoyang disciples to rush over to take a look at what was happening. "Who are you? How dare you to be so provocative and unruly in front of our Shaoyang sub-school residents?" A young disciple came out and said, "Get lost!" Yi Shiwen indifferently said, "You bastard, I will kill you!" The young disciple suddenly rushed furiously towards Yi Shiwen, and his Quan Jin twisted and blasted out of his fists, and went towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Ziwen's big hand stretched out, and it seemed as if the lingqi had condensed around his hand to form an iron wall. Yi Shiwen fiercely struck his hand into that disciple's body. Bang! The disciple directly flew out while spouting blood from his mouth and fainted instantly. This loud sound immediately attracted the attention of many disciples in the courtyard of Shaoyang sub-school, and only after a moment, dozens of disciples had arrived and completely surrounded Yi Shiwen. Release of sponsored Chapter 81 may get delayed, so I would recommend those who live in the time zones, where it's already late, to not wait and go to bed slightly smiling face. Chapter 82 will come as a sponsored release on Tuesday. Raised so far $38, 127%. Queue is cleared for Chapter 81, 100%. Queue status for Chapter 82, 27%. Chapter 81. NT, thanks to Jan Henrik Dux, Germany, for sponsoring this chapter. Chapter 81. When Shiyang comes out only after a moment, dozens of disciples from Shaoyang sub-school had arrived and completely surrounded Yi Shiwen. "Who are you? How dare you come to our Shaoyang sub-school and act so unruly?" Many of the disciples from Shaoyang sub-school were angry, but among them were present some of those disciples who were part of Hu Cheng's group and had gone to bully the disciples of the Qifeng Mountain. They immediately recognized Yishiwen and were suddenly frightened because they could vividly remember that scene where Yishiwen had bedeviled a Xiantian master like Huqing, who was also one of the top genius disciples from their sub-school. "Go tell Wen Shuyang to come out right now!" Yishiwen shouted. These disciples from Shaoyang's sub-school had tried to take advantage of absence of the elders to thoroughly discredit Qifeng Mountain sub-school and destroy its reputation. So all Yishiwen was trying to do was return the favor by doing the exact same thing, in the exact same pattern, to Shaoyang's sub-school, and intended to thoroughly defeat and crush their strongest disciple in front of everyone. Huqing's reputation was not big enough, so defeating him didn't solve the purpose of tit for tat, so Yishiwen had personally come to play with Shaoyang sub-school's strongest disciple. "Who are you? How dare you call Brother Wen's name in such a disrespectful manner?" At this time, a young disciple, who appeared to be in his 20s, came out of the courtyard and looked firmly at Yishiwen. "A mere man from Qifeng Mountain sub-school, daring to act wildly in front of our Shaoyang sub-school, you are really courting death." The young man sneered, and within few steps, he had already arrived in front of Yishiwen with an extremely fast speed, and at this moment, the imposing aura of a Xiantian master instantly released from his body and spread out. Yishiwen immediately knew who this man actually was. He was named Su Liang and was one of the top 3 Xiantian disciples of the Shaoyang sub-school. Since Yishiwen had already met Huqing and defeated him, and when this man came out, he referred Wen Shuyang as Brother Wen, so he was not Wen Shuyang as well and could only be the 3rd Xiantian master of the Shaoyang sub-school, Su Liang. Su Liang's strength was very high, almost not under Huqing's strength, which proved the fact that this year's batch of top disciples from Shaoyang sub-school was indeed very powerful, and no wonder they had dared to bully a rival sub-school. However, after transforming 50% of his Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi, the strength of Yishiwen was now comparable to that of ordinary Xiantian 3rd stage masters. Also, his own cultivation was at the peak of Xiantian 1st stage, so how could Su Liang be his match? Ordinary Xiantian 3rd stage masters are those who have only transformed 50% of their Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi. Yishiwen raised his hand to block the incoming attack, and with a bang, a loud sound of air explosion resounded everywhere. Su Liang's offensive attack had been staggered right in front of Yishiwen, as if Su Liang had collided into a huge iron wall, setting off a terrifying blast that swept across. During the fight between Xiantian masters, almost each of their punches could easily burst into air explosions, causing the air to vibrate and shake violently, just like how the ripples dance violently on the surface of a lake, fluctuating and distorting its original calmness. Su Liang's eyes widened with a flash of surprise clearly visible in his eyes. He obviously did not expect Yishiwen to be able to easily block his blow, though his attack just now seemed hasty, but he knew in his heart that before coming out of the courtyard gate, he had already started to prepare a sudden surprise attack on Yishiwen, but he never thought that his planned-out offensive attack would be useless against Yishiwen, who was just standing there with his one hand on his front side, like an impenetrable iron wall. "My turn!" Yishiwen sneered and threw out a lightning-fast kick towards Su Liang, accompanied by a burst of crackling air explosions. Yizaiwen's kick was so fast that it was blowing the sound of a whistle in the air, as it was going straight for Su Liang. Su Liang was well prepared and immediately leaped up to avoid Yizaiwen's kick, but without any stagnation, Yishiwen did not even give him any time to gasp for a breath, and immediately slapped out his palm. Rushing Thunder Hand, pass like thunder and move like the wind. For a time, Yizaiwen's attack looked similar to the 9th Heaven's thunder. Bang! Su Liang lifted his hand to block, but immediately, a sudden burst of cracking sound resounded in the surrounding. The bones inside Su Liang's arms had been broken under the direct impact of Yizaiwen's palm attack, which possessed the strength of 19 dragons, which was quite terrifying because Su Liang had only reached the strength of 2 dragons and could never rival Yizaiwen's tyrannical strength. Yishiwen had not even put any effort, and had just shot his palm, but even this was more than enough to instantly crush both arms of Su Liang. The sound of breaking bones had suddenly scared the crowd of Shaoyang disciples. "Ah!" Su Liang screamed again and again. although a few of them had already seen the one-sided beating of Huicheng at the hands of Yishiwen, and knew that he was very powerful, but they did not expect that Su Liang would be so drastically injured by a single attack from Yishiwen. Su Liang could not even stop a single move from Yishiwen. It was too fast to notice, but Yi Zaiwen's palm attack also had an essence of missing moon beheader present in it. He had already practiced missing moon beheader to the Deshang realm, and it had come in handy. Instead of using his long blade, he had used his fingertips to perform the skill of missing moon beheader. He had also integrated the essence of this skill inside his body, which had now become almost incomparably tough like the reinforced iron itself. Even without using his blade, though losing a bit of its true power and range of attack, this attack was still tyrannically powerful and effective. Having the skill of missing moon beheader and along with the essence of his rushing thunderhand, his palm attack had become faster, stronger, and terrifyingly heavy. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's palm rumbled and shot into the chest of Su Liang, breaking his breastbone immediately. Yishiwen had tried his best to control the power in this palm attack, otherwise, if left unconstrained, this attack would have instantly killed Su Liang. But even after restraining his strength, Yi Zaiwen's attack contained such a terrifying force that it had directly sent Su Liang flying into the crowd of Shaoyang disciples, and the impact made him unconscious immediately. Silence. There was a pin-drop silence on the scene. When the spectating disciples of many sub-schools saw the instant defeat of Su Liang at the hands of Yishiwen, all of them immediately gasped. Immediately afterwards, a buzzing sound of discussions instantly filled the surrounding area. How is this possible? Su Liang was so easily defeated at the hands of this man. That palm attack was definitely an astonishing ability. This man is so powerful, I'm afraid he can easily compete with Wen Shuyang. And like always, these Xiantian masters will become stepping stones for someone else like that Huiqing and Su Liang, although both of them are quite famous and would have become even more famous in the future, but now, they have become a stepping stone for this man. It has always been this way. These geniuses contend with each other, and only the invincible ones walk the bloody path to success. I'll wait to become powerful enough to be able to walk on the same path. After this battle, regardless of the outcome, the name of this person will spread throughout the main sect, and I'm afraid that before long, a lot of people will come to challenge him. After defeating Su Liang, Yishiwen stepped forward and shouted, Wen Shuyang, come out, if you're truly a man. Who are you? State your name. This time, a purple-robed young man, with a dignified look on his face, came out of the courtyard. You're Wen Shuyang? Yishiwen glanced at him and said, Who are you? Wen Shuyang looked at Yishiwen and said, Qingfeng Mountain Sub-Schools Yishiwen. Yishiwen indifferently said, Are you the one who wounded my brother? So you are Yifeng's little brother. You dared to come here and actually caused ruckus and trouble for everyone. You are quite courageous, aren't you? But you should have thought before offending the school regulations. Wen Shuyang said. Tuesday, Chapter 82 will come as a sponsored release. Raised so far $18, 60%. Q status for Chapter 82, 60%. Chapter 82. NT, thanks to Jan Henrik Dux, Germany, Ivor Fennel, U.S., and Zachary Paul, U.S., for sponsoring Chapter 82, Chapter 82 Creative Concept. So you are Yifeng's little brother. You dared to come here and actually caused ruckus and trouble for everyone. You are quite courageous, aren't you? But you should have thought before offending the school regulations. Wen Shuyang said. School regulations? Yishiwen laughed loudly. If people really cared about school regulations, then Yifeng would not have been injured and all of this would not have happened as well. And those so-called school regulations were just an excuse to protect the weak. Strong never cared about these old regulations. Earlier when Wen Shuyang had bullied Yi Zaiwen's fellow disciples, then he did not think of school regulations. But now that the same thing had been done to his people, he suddenly remembered about it. It was quite hilarious. Cut the crap, today I have come for just one thing, to return the favor by doing the same thing you did to my brother. Yishiwen sneered. You are courting death, Wen Shuyang said and glared at Yishiwen. He was the unrivaled genius of Shaoyang Subschool, and no one dared to talk to him like this. So, the words of Yishiwen had made him extremely furious. Wen Shuyang rushed forward, almost like a blurred figure, while breaking through the sound barrier, causing a terrifying piercing sound which spread throughout the sky. Immediately after that, many spectating disciples directly fell on the ground with their eardrums bleeding from this terrifying sound. Clang! A long blade appeared in the hands of Wen Shuyang that he taken out from the storage ring, and in a flash, his blade instantly chopped out towards Yishiwen. Wen Shuyang was very powerful compared to Wuqing or Su Liang, and was already at the Xiantian second stage with 30% transformed Xiantian Jinqi. Although his transformed Xiantian Jinqi was only 10% more than the other two, but his strength was already twice their strength. Yishiwen didn't demur, and immediately unsheathed the long blade from his back with a clang sound, and shot a terrifying bladiki towards the sky, and it seemed as if the moon was slowly rising. Instantly, the pressure dropped down in the surrounding area, clearly displaying that Yishiwen had already obtained a thorough understanding of his blade technique, and everyone was shocked when the true meaning of Yizaiwen's blade skills suddenly evolved in front of them. Although Wen Shuyang had also practiced a high-grade blade technique, but it was obvious that currently, his blade skill was nowhere near the profound blade skill of Yishiwen. In a short time, Wen Shuyang would be able to reach the Deshang realm of his blade skill, and only then, he might evolve out the creative concept of his blade skill. The difference between their mastery of blade skills alone was too big. What is this creative concept? I actually saw a moon pressed down by the blade attack. One of the disciples was stunned and said. Yizaiwen's blade technique could already bring forth the creative concept after it had been practiced to the Xiantian realm, and although the power of the move Full Moon Beheader was comparable to that of an advanced power technique, but Cold Moon Beheader was actually a Xiantian level blade technique, and even if the power contained in each of its moves were different, but all of them contained an inherent creative concept. Cold Moon Beheader is the name of Yizaiwen's blade technique, and Full Moon Beheader is one of the three moves offered by this technique. Only those power techniques which contained a creative concept could be called Xiantian power techniques, and if one could not bring forth the creative concept of a technique, then the Xiantian level techniques were no different from the advanced techniques. But if one could successfully understand and evolve out the creative concept of a technique, then the power of his technique would increase by leaps and bounds, and the technique would be able to display its ideal form. All of those outstanding disciples from different sub-schools, who were watching from the crowd, knew very well about the importance of the creative concept of a technique. They knew that even if someone was to practice a Xiantian level technique to the Deshang realm, they still might not be able to comprehend the creative concept hidden inside it, and would only be able to harness its strength up to the advanced stage. Being able to realize the creative concept at such a young age was extremely rare. This is really a creative concept, I have only seen elders displaying the creative concept their techniques. My God, how can it appear in the body of an ordinary person? Creative concept, it actually is a creative concept. Just by virtue of this creative concept, I'm sure that Yishiwen will easily enter into the current top 10 great disciples. Countless people were shocked, including Wen Shuyang, who was the closest witness of Yizaiwen's terrifying display of the creative concept of his blade skill. When this creative concept was brandished, a terrifying pressure had appeared in the surrounding area, as if the sky had fallen down on the ground, and it seemed like the bright moon had appeared, but it actually didn't exist. But Wen Shuyang could vividly feel as if he was taking a walk on a moonlit road, and the bright moonlight was coming down from the heaven and had spilled on the ground, revealing even the slightest detail present in the scenery, leaving nowhere for the secrets to hide under this pure white moonlight, which also contained a penetrating feeling. This kind of oppressive feeling had already made Wen Shuyang anxious about this fight, and his mind was also in a confused state. How is this possible? How is this possible? Wen Shuyang could not believe his eyes, because even practicing one move to the Deshang realm was very tough, and one could say that they had grasped the essence of the technique. but to be able to comprehend and display a creative concept was equivalent to completely commanding the power of that move to its utmost extent. Because all of these Xiantian-level techniques or above were once realized and created by the experts, and these techniques were the so-called imitations of nature itself, hence, there would definitely be a creative concept hidden inside them. In fact, these creative concepts had initially urged those experts to comprehend the moves based on these creative concepts and append them to form the power techniques. And only after truly comprehending the move to its acme, Yi Zaiwen's blade skill had evolved to such a terrifying extent and had displayed this clear and beautiful, but overwhelming, scenery to the spectators. And Yi Zaiwen's display of the creative concept was extremely clear, indicating that he had thoroughly mastered the move. It was simply unbelievable. There was a look of disbelief in the eyes of Wen Shiyang. To think that Yi Shiwen had not just reached the Deshang realm of his blade skill, but he had also comprehended its creative concept? But he didn't have time to be shocked, because if Yi Shiwen had actually evolved this level of creative concept, then he was definitely in a dangerous situation. He would never know that Yi Shiwen had the special space. For others, to be able to comprehend the creative concepts, they had to be very talented, but in Yi Zaiwen's case, so long as there were enough spirit stones in his possession, he would be able to completely understand and practice any technique. Yi Shiwen perhaps was not the most talented, nor the strongest, but he was hard-working, and so long as he had enough spirit stones, his practice speed would reach a terrifying level. Because for others, to practice and comprehend was like going into a huge tract of a library and read a variety of books to have an understanding and gain insights. For that, they needed to have high talent, in order to find out the exact direction they needed to search and to find the answers, and they were lucky, they might just find the right book. But this was not the case with Yi Shiwen, because he seemed to have an intelligent books resolution system that could select the correct book for him, and so long as he swiped the card to pay the money, he could obtain just the book he needed, which would automatically be delivered to him, and he wouldn't have to go into the vast sea of books to search. Even for those geniuses, the chances of comprehending the creative concept were not high, let alone those ordinary disciples. Yi Shiwen chopped down his long blade, and the live picture drawn by the creative concept directly descended over Wen Xiang's bladiki and instantly crushed it down under its terrifying pressure, which seemed as if the whole world was collapsing inch by inch. Their bladiki collided in the midair, and the friction caused a loud and sharp whistling sound, which then set off a wave of sound waves. Boom! Finally, Yi Zaiwen's bladiki instantly crushed the bladiki of Wen Shiyang, and fiercely blasted into his body. Bang! Wen Xiang's blade couldn't block this incredible attack from Yi Shiwen, and his body was sent flying horizontally, while he spat out a mouthful of blood. Wednesday, Chapter 83 will come as a regular release, along with sponsored Chapter 84 and 85, depending on donations and my schedule, raised so far, $22, 73%. Q status for Chapter 84, 73%. Q status for Chapter 85, 0%. Chapter 83. NT. This chapter is a regular release. Since the donation queue for sponsored chapters 84 and 85 didn't clear in time, they will come as sponsored releases on Thursday. Chapter 83 fame spreads. Everyone was silent. One move, just a single move. In a flash, the spectating disciples had witnessed how the reputation of Wen Shiyang was zapped and completely overwhelmed by a single flash of Yi Zaiwen's Xiantian Bladiki. There was a huge difference between Xiantian and Houtian Jinqi, and 30% transformed Xiantian Jinqi, in fact, had incredible density and toughness, but he was still nowhere near to be Yi Zaiwen's match. Yi Shiwen had used his creative concept combined with his Bladiki to display such an incredible prowess, and everyone was aware of the fact that, at that time, if Yi Shiwen had not restrained his true strength, then Wen Shiyang would definitely have been split in half. Although school regulations were relatively wide, but were not wide enough to allow killing someone in front of a large crowd, at least, Yi Shiwen was not powerful enough to override school regulations. But today, if even he had died at the hands of Yi Shiwen, although it would have caused trouble, but Shaoyang sub-school's people could only swallow the bitter pill. All of their Xiantian masters had been defeated and their own strengths were not good enough. Also, nobody would come to show their sympathy to them because everyone knew that people of the Shaoyang sub-school were the real perpetrators this time, and this result was inevitable for them. Finished, really finished. All of the outstanding disciples of Shaoyang sub-school had been defeated, and if they didn't recover in time before the beginning of school assessment, then Shaoyang sub-school wouldn't be able to participate in the assessment because without its top 3 Xiantian masters, it would have no chance to win. This entry assessment of the main sect was not just an ordinary assessment, because it was directly related to the future developments of the various sub-schools. In the main sect, the resources and facilities were allocated to these sub-schools based on the performance of their outstanding disciples respectively. In the eyes of the main sect, although it allowed entry to weak disciples as well, but it only was a place for elite disciples from various sub-schools, so of course, it would provide more rewards and resources to more powerful disciples, and these elite disciples would also get more resources in the coming year. This was the reason why the various sub-schools would not hesitate to spend their resources on these geniuses before sending them to the main sect. But now, all 3 Xiantian masters of Shaoyang sub-school had been devastated effortlessly, and that too in front of everyone. It was totally inconceivable that this year's Shaoyang sub-school was definitely the worst of the crowd, and this would directly affect the allocation of resources in the coming year for it. Earlier, when Shaoyang sub-school disciples had gone to bully the disciples of Qifeng Mountain sub-school, they would never have expected that things would come to this, and that too by the interference of just one man. The fight between these 2 men had directly determined the status of the 2 sub-schools, and the results of this fight was that the reputation of Qifeng Mountain sub-school had skyrocketed and become like a tough iron sheet, after completely destroying the reputation of Shaoyang sub-school. After this, he would thoroughly become famous, a disciple standing in the crowd murmured. As if a big rock had been dropped in a calm lake, in a flash, Yi Ziwen's fame had spread off like the intermittent waves. The news that Yi Shiwen had effortlessly defeated Shaoyang sub-school's strongest disciple, Wen Shiyang, had spread among more than 100 sub-schools. Originally among thousands of disciples, Wen Shiyang was not one of the strongest, and was only a minor celebrity. Even if Yi Shiwen had defeated Wen Shiyang, this was not that big of a deal for other elite disciples, but everyone present during the fight had seen how Yi Shiwen had used the creative concept of his blade technique to a profound level. This had made him to suddenly become a target and focus of attention of many people. In the Qifeng Mountain sub-school's courtyard, Yi Feng was standing. He was a Xiantian master, so his resilience was very tough. Plus he had consumed a lot of high-grade medicinal pills provided by Yi Shiwen, so his condition had become a lot better, and he could walk around easily. At this rate, he would be completely healed before the beginning of assessment. Nearby, Yi Shiwen and Yi Rixue, his 2 siblings, stood quietly, and Zhang Yang, Wu Hao and Qian Wanru were also present, making this a gathering of Qifeng Mountain younger generation's top disciples. The news about Brother Ye's fight with Wen Shiyang has spread everywhere. After knowing that Brother Yi has used creative concept of his blade technique, I'm afraid a lot of people won't be able to sleep now. Now they won't dare to underestimate Qifeng Mountain sub-school, Qian Wanru said in a very excited tone. Qifeng Mountain was located in the remote areas of Great Yu State, and Qifeng Mountain sub-school was always discriminated against by the schools from bigger districts. Yes, I'm afraid there are people who cannot sleep, and it seems that some are deliberately adding fuel to the fire, Yi Feng said with a sigh. This news had spread so fast, so wide, that it was clearly not the result of self-propagation and natural dissemination, and it was certain that people were adding fuel to the flames. I think people just want to stir the muddy water. Zhang Yang frowned and said, Someone wants us to become the target of public criticism, and they may join hands to destroy us. There's a possibility that you may be right. It is true that in the past, our sub-school had become friends with many sub-schools, but had also made a lot of enemies, and in a short time, we will come to know the inside and outside of this matter. Yi Feng said, It doesn't matter if they are deliberately spreading the news, or adding fuel to the flames. If we want to stand out during the coming assessment, we must be prepared to face all of this. Yishuan said, "It's quite simple, we will knock down anyone who tries to come in our way." Yi Zaiwen's discourse revealed self-confidence. He knew that any plots or conspiracies were nothing in face of a formidable strength, and could only accomplish elimination and nothing else. Ha ha ha, right, what little brother said is absolutely right. We will overthrow any plots thrown at us, no matter which method they resort to. Yi Feng laughed, and said, "If someone wants to see what we are made up of, we will let them see enough. Our Qingfeng Mountain Sub-School is not worse than any other school." Yishuan said with a cold smile on his face. "Yes, that's right." Yi Feng nodded, then turned to Yirishue and said, "Now I am all right and can take care of myself, so you don't have to look after me anymore. Go, use these few days left before the assessment to finish your closed-door training and try your best to break through to the Xiantian realm. At the time of assessment, we would be happy to have one more helper." Yirishue looked at Yi Feng, then nodded and said, "Okay." She also knew that if she did not break into the Xiantian realm, then she won't be of any help to them. She still had the Xiantian pellet, gifted to her by Yishuan, and breaking into the Xiantian realm was now much easier for her than others. Without a Xiantian pellet, even in the environment of main sect, breaking through to the Xiantian realm would still take a lot of time and effort. Both Wu Hao and Qian Wanru were somewhat enviously looking at Yirishue, but unfortunately, they did not have a Xiantian pellet, and it would take them some time before they finally enter into the Xiantian realm. Then, abruptly, a disciple of the Qifeng Mountain Sub-School hastily ran inside the courtyard and said, "It's bad. A person has come outside to challenge Brother Yi." As expected, they really came. Yi Feng said, "So fast." Zhang Yang frowned and said, "They'll go and take a look." Yishuan said. Yishuan went out of the courtyard and was surprised to find a white-robed youth coldly looking at him. This tall and sturdy young man's eyes had a faint xingqi which burst out and splashed in all directions. He was exuding an ice-cold chill aura which appeared to be coming out from the glaciers. When Yishuan glanced at him, the youth seemed as if his whole body was frozen, just like a man made up of ice. Correction: in Chapter 62, I noticed a typo, where I had written Yirishue was 2 years older than Yishuan, which was a typo, and it actually should be Yirishue was 20 years old and 1 year older than Yishuan. Thanks to Slawi for bringing this to my notice. Laughing face, Friday, since Q didn't clear for sponsored Chapter 84 in time, so it will come as a regular release on Friday. Good night. Raised so far $35, 116%. Q is cleared for Chapter 85, 100%. Q status for Chapter 86, 16%. Chapter 84. NT, this chapter is a regular release. Also, I announced the grand release of minimum 6 sponsored chapters, which may go up to 8 releases. These chapters will be released on Saturday and rest on Sunday, excluding 1 regular release on Sunday, depending on donations and my schedule. I decided to organize this grand release to compensate for the lost sponsored chapters this week. Let's see if I can reach my target of releasing up to Chapter 93 by Sunday. Chapter 84. The 3 major sub-schools. The disciples from many sub-schools had gathered around to watch this fight, and disciples from other mountain peaks had also arrived because Yi Zaiwen's fame had attracted them here, and these disciples were very interested to take a look at the strongest disciple of Qifeng Mountain Sub-School, who had recently got the limelight. Yishuan looked at the challenger and said, "Are you going to challenge me?" "Certainly," the man said. "Who are you?" Yishuan asked. "Bingdao Sub-School's Chu Sun," the man replied. "NT, Bingdao means Iceland, Bingdao, so he was actually the disciple of Bingdao Sub-School, no wonder. On the east coastline of the Great Yu State, near the sea, there were some sub-schools, but Bingdao was one of the most famous ones because the disciples there practiced ice attribute power techniques. Ages ago, the forefathers had set up this system, as there was a world of ice and snow in 300 miles radius of the seacoast, and was the best environment for practicing ice attribute techniques. The disciples who passed out from the Bingdao sub-school were always very powerful. Sub-schools could be divided into strong or weak categories, and Qifeng Mountain sub-school was one of the relatively weak, but on the contrary, Bingdao sub-school had always been known as one of the three major sub-schools. In the crowd of sub-schools, Bingdao sub-school's strength was ranked among the best. Chu Sun, he is Bingdao's Chu Sun, no wonder his strength seems so formidable, a disciple exclaimed. So he is, no wonder, excluding those three invincible masters, Chu Sun can be considered as one of the strongest. You are Chu Sun? Yi Shiwen said. After staying here for more than a day, it was not that Yi Shiwen did not know anything, and he had certainly been informed about the outstanding disciples of various strong sub-schools. This term's batch of sub-school disciples was the strongest batch known for centuries, as if strong masters had literally reigned on the main sect. And the top three players among them were definitely the most outstanding disciples of the three sub-schools. In the past, the disciples of these three major sub-schools were the strongest, and therefore, they had obtained the most resources compared to other sub-schools and cultivated stronger disciples for the next term. With the repetition of this cycle, over time, these three sub-schools had gradually become the most formidable sub-schools with their strengths and resources far above other sub-schools. It could be said that, like always, all of the disciples of this session of the three major sub-schools were already in the Xiantian realm, and not only that, not a single Hotian realm disciples would be attending the assessment from these sub-schools. When Yi Shiwen heard this news, he could not help but held his breath in astonishment. All were Xiantian masters. What kind of ridiculous situation was this? It was said that these major sub-schools would put great and costly efforts to cultivate strong Xiantian disciples. And if the three major sub-schools would send more and more Xiantian disciples, then the other sub-schools had to spend as well on their outstanding disciples, although they never expected to be better than the other three major sub-schools, but at least, their own disciples wouldn't be easily bullied by the disciples of the three sub-schools. But because the Qifeng Mountain Yiyuan School was situated far away in the remote regions of Great Yu State, they obtained the news very late. No one knew how strong the three invincible masters actually were, because no one had forced them to use the full strength. But the hierarchy of the disciples was well known to everyone, in which experts like Chu Sun held higher position compared to Wen Shiyang and others. In fact, Chu Sun was a lot stronger than Wen Shiyang. I hear that you claim to be the strongest sub-school disciple, so I have personally come to teach you a lesson, so that you know the immensity of heaven and earth, Chu Sun coldly said. Certainly, it was not Yi Shiwen who had claimed to be the strongest disciple, but someone with ulterior motives, and they naturally didn't have good intentions for Qifeng Mountain Sub-School and its disciples. Whether I am the strongest disciple or not is none of your business, and you actually came to lecture me for this. Don't you have anything better to do? Yi Shiwen sneered and said. Anyways, this Chu Sun was really too arrogant. Just because he heard Yi Zaiwen's name as the strongest disciple, he actually came to teach him a lesson? Does he really think that Yi Shiwen would just stand there and take his punches? You are courting death! Chu Sun had become furious. Who was he? He was a top disciple of Bingdao Sub-School, one of three major sub-schools, but Yi Shiwen had dared to talk disrespectfully with him. Today I will cripple you and turn you into a pile of bones. Depends on you. Yi Shiwen repeatedly sneered. Chu Sun's figure suddenly flashed, and his Jinqi suddenly released out of his body. The ambient temperature of the surroundings steeply plunged, as if sucked into the world of ice and snow. Huge and ice-cold Jinqi aura had instantly turned the entire surrounding pure white, and the ferocious power of Chu Sun, which was far above Wen Shiyang, had properly displayed itself in front of everyone with his 40% transformed Xiantian Jinqi surging majestically high into the sky. After breaking through to the Xiantian first stage, ordinary masters possessed 10% transformed Xiantian Jinqi, and only after transforming 20% of their Xiantian Jinqi, they could reach the peak of Xiantian first stage. Similarly, after reaching the Xiantian second stage, those with 30% transformed Xiantian Jinqi were considered ordinary third-stage masters, and only after transforming 40% Xiantian Jinqi, they could reach the peak of Xiantian's second stage. Chu Sun was at the peak of Xiantian's second stage, and compared to an average expert, he was extremely powerful. Chu Sun shot his palm with a snow-white Jinqi wrapped on his arms, resembling a pure white crystal, which was unusually beautiful, but incredibly dangerous. His palm viciously shot and directly froze the surrounding air while producing a crackling sound. When Yi Shiwen saw Chu Sun's palm approaching towards him, in an instant Yi Shiwen moved his hands and shot him palms, covered in a terrifying Jinqi, which directly moved forward towards the incoming attack. Bang! 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 Their fight immediately approached the acme, and in an instant, a dozen blows had been exchanged between the two. Chu Sun was amazed, as he never thought that Yi Shiwen would be able to block his moves so easily. As one of the top disciples in Bingdao Sub-School, although he was not the strongest, but he was still ranked among the top 5, but even so, he actually couldn't press down Yi Shiwen even after exchanging so many blows. He originally thought of Yi Shiwen as a boy who was boasting around after a little success, claiming to be the strongest disciple, but he never imagined that this boastful boy would actually be so strong. After coming to the main sect, many disciples bragged about themselves, but in Chu Sun's view, they were nothing but clowns. Even his big brother had never said that he was the strongest disciple. Then how could this man act recklessly and claim himself as the strongest disciple? He was in a bad mood and had come to vent his anger on Yi Shiwen, but he never thought that fighting Yi Shiwen would be like kicking an iron wall. Could it be that you are only at this level? Yi Shiwen sneered and said. Raised so far $300, 1000%. Q is cleared for sponsored chapters 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93 and 94. Thanks to Zachary Paul, U.S., Shauna Avila, U.S., Anonymous, Doha, and Sai Puklupti, UK, for sponsoring Chapter 85. Thanks to Amarija Andrews, U.S., and Sivanchantha, U.S., for sponsoring Chapter 86. Thanks again to Sivanchantha, U.S., for sponsoring Chapters 87, 88, 89, 90, 91 and 92. Thanks to Jeffrey Dementier, France, for sponsoring Chapter 93. Thanks to Thomas Metzger, U.S., and Corey Sagawa, U.S., for sponsoring Chapter 94. Chapter 85. NT. I start the Saturday's grand release with this chapter. Thanks to Zachary Paul, U.S., Shauna Avila, U.S., Anonymous, Doha, and Sai Puklupti, UK, for sponsoring Chapter 85. Chapter 85. The difference of 10. Could it be that you are only at this level? Yi Shiwen sneered and said. Yi Shiwen shot his palms with a shabu thunder-like rumbling sound, and this set of palm method in his hands could be considered superb. Bang! Yi Ziwen's palm shot, and Chu Sun raised his hand to block. Suddenly, with a loud noise, a great force transmitted into the arms of Chu Sun, which numbed from the shock. Chu Sun's ice-cold Jinqi instantly covered all over his arms, suddenly covering with a burst of coldness, and expelled the numbing feeling from his arms. He was extremely shocked in his heart. How could this man's strength reach such dreadful proportions? Whether it was Hu Qing or Wen Shuyang, the strengths of both of them were far worse than the strength of Yi Shiwen, so they never had a chance against Yi Shiwen, also when they couldn't even force him to use his full force. In Yi Ziwen's fight with those two, he had easily defeated them in not more than a single strike that had directly broken all the bones in their bodies, causing them to lose consciousness immediately. The fight had finished so fast that the spectators did not get enough time to feel the real terrifying strength of Yi Shiwen. Anyway, no matter how much force he had used, they would have fainted instantly. But Chu Sun was different, and even if Yi Ziwen's combat strength was equivalent to the ordinary masters of Xiantian third stage, but Chu Sun's strength was also close to the Xiantian third stage, though a bit less, and that was the reason why he had not directly fainted in one move from Yi Shiwen. But also because of this, everyone had got a chance to witness Yi Zaiwen's terrifying strength of 19 dragons that had totally overwhelmed Chu Sun's strength of 9 dragons. Chu Sun was facing a master who possessed the strength more than twice his own strength. Transformed 10% Xiantian Jinqi granted the strength of 1 dragon, 20% transformed Xiantian Jinqi granted the strength of 2 dragons. But after transforming 30% Xiantian Jinqi, one could reach the strength of 5 dragons. After transforming 40% Xiantian Jinqi and reaching the peak of Xiantian's second stage, Chu Sun's strength had reached the peak strength of 9 dragons. Once he would break through to the Xiantian third stage after transforming 50% Xiantian Jinqi, his strength would further reach the strength of 10 dragons, which was still lower than Yi Zaiwen's current strength. After transforming 60% Xiantian Jinqi and reaching the peak of Xiantian third stage, one could gain the strength ranging from the strength of 20 dragons to 49 dragons. Since Yi Shiwen was already at the peak of 50% transformed Xiantian Jinqi and had reached the strength of 19 dragons, which was more than twice Chu Sun's current strength, each of his blows contained a terrifying strength and was instantly numbing the arms of Chu Sun. Although, like always, Yi Shiwen had not beaten Chu Sun in one shot, but he had already put Chu Sun in a tough situation where he was secretly crying incessantly in his heart. He was constantly shouting in his heart that what kind of monster was Yi Shiwen. Just from taking a look at him, no one could make a guess that a master of Xiantian first stage could actually possess such a monstrous strength. Chu Sun noticed that Yi Shiwen was only using his palm technique, but with brute force contained in each shot, to actually force him into spending all his Jinqi just for defense. Such monstrous strength, even if it was inferior to the 3 invincible masters, but it was still equivalent to one of the top underplayers. How could such a figure appear in a small subschool like Qifeng Mountain Subschool, located in the remote area of Great Yu State? But Chu Sun didn't get enough time to think about all that because of the relentless attacks of Yi Shiwen. It was clear that Yi Shiwen had thoroughly grabbed the upper hand in this battle. Pass like thunder and move like the wind. Lightning and thunder. Ghostly thunder axe. Leveling storm 4 strokes. These 4 moves of rushing thunder hand technique had been used by Yi Shiwen, as if they had been used by the god himself, with each of these moves containing tremendous strength, coming one after the other, almost with no pause, with perfection, producing thunder-like rumbling sound in between the moves, as if they contained the power of heavenly thunder. Chu Sun had been totally pressed down under Yi Zaiwen's non-stop strikes and was totally depressed. How could he not know about rushing thunder hand? This was a lower-level power technique taught in almost all sub-schools and throughout the Great Yu State. There were countless people who knew this technique, but no one had ever displayed this kind of might while using this technique. It was as if Yi Shiwen had fully assimilated the true essence of this technique, and had displayed its ideal form in front of everyone. Even those elders could not be compared to Yi Shiwen when it came to mastery over power techniques. But for Chu Sun, the most depressing thing was that Yi Shiwen had used a lower-level power technique and displayed such a terrifying might that he had actually been completely pressed down, and could only fight a defensive battle. After this, he would not be able to lift his head out of shame. When Chu Sun was a child, he had practiced a lower-level power technique for some time, but soon, when his cultivation level had progressed, he had soon abandoned it for practicing an intermediate power technique, and now that he had already practiced advanced power techniques and Xiantian power techniques, he would never even think of using a lower-level power technique in battles. But right now, he was being defeated by a lower-level power technique? He never thought that lower-level techniques could actually gain such terrifying might, especially when wielded by Yi Shiwen. Bang! 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 The metal clashing sound spread each time Yi Shiwen and Chu Sun collided and exchanged moves. A terrifying battle between the 2 powerful Xiantian masters was sending blast waves everywhere in the surroundings. This is so incredible. I did not think that Yi Shiwen would actually be able to fight off Chu Sun without losing for such a long time. Lose? It is obvious that Chu Sun has been completely pushed down by Yi Shiwen and his defeat is inevitable. A disciple laughed loudly and said, Moreover, Yi Shiwen has not used his strongest technique yet. That day, I saw the true strength of his blade technique when Shuyang had lost in a single blade attack, but right now, Yi Shiwen has not drawn his blade, otherwise Chu Sun would not be able to withstand for so long. Wait until Yi Shiwen draws his blade, because then, Chu Sun would not be able to play defensive like this. I never thought that this Yi Shiwen would actually be so powerful, and it seems that except for those 3 invincible experts, Yi Shiwen is definitely one of the top star-ranked disciples. Chu Sun's hands had gradually numbed with no way to relieve this numbness even after using his Jinqi. He was still unable to accept this turn of events in his heart. How could this be? Yi Shiwen had not even drawn his blade and was already so powerful. Was Yi Shiwen going to defeat him without even using his blade? How is this possible? There was a difference of strength of 10 dragons between the strengths of Chu Sun and Yi Shiwen. Although Chu Sun was using a superior power technique than Rushing Thunderhand, but by virtue of the degree of mastery over Rushing Thunderhand and the terrifying strength of 19 dragons, Yi Shiwen had completely pressed him down. But Chu Sun was still unwilling to accept this result where he might get defeated by a Xiantian first stage master like Yi Shiwen. Finally, Chu Sun's hands had completely numbed and he couldn't block the relentless attacks of Yi Shiwen, and was sent flying out while screaming. Dash. Chapter 86. NT, thanks to Amarija Andrews, U.S., and Sivan Chantha, U.S., for sponsoring Chapter 86. This is the second chapter of the Saturday's grand release. 3 more to come. Chapter 86. You all can come together. Everyone was shocked watching this scene, because no one was able to see the depth of Yi Zaiwen's true strength. The stronger his enemy was, the stronger he would become accordingly. Earlier, his battle with Wuqing and now with Chu Sun, each time, his strength would grow, which was very shocking for everyone. It was as if his strength was truly unfathomable. Yi Shiwen looked coldly at Chu Sun. Although this guy was conceited and very arrogant, but there was a valid reason behind his arrogance, as he was at the peak of Xiantian's second stage and his strength was indeed sufficient enough to be ranked among the top row of the disciples. Yi Shiwen almost could not waste his cultivation because just when he had shot his palm towards Chu Sun, his intention had been detected by Chu Sun, who then blocked Yi Zaiwen's palm and slightly deflected it. Yi Shiwen, accept our challenge! Yi Shiwen was still thinking about this matter when suddenly he heard 3 loud voices, challenging him. Yi Shiwen looked up and actually saw that 3 similar wretched-looking fat people had jumped out of the crowd. Shameless! The 3 of you are taking advantage of him who has just finished fighting a battle. These 3 are the infamous Zhongshe 3 brothers from Qingqing Sub-School. So they are the Zhongshe 3 brothers. Ah, no wonder they are too outrageous. After coming to the main sect, it didn't take long for the Zhongshe 3 brothers to gain quite a reputation, and of course, this reputation was not a good one. These 3 brothers were really shameless. Yi Shiwen also knew about the Zhongshe 3 brothers and could only sigh. So, do you dare to accept our challenge? The eldest of the 3 Zhongshe brothers challenged Yi Shiwen in a provocative manner. In spite of facing criticism from the crowd, 3 Zhongshe brothers were not willing to give up. Now that Yi Shiwen had already defeated Chu Sun, they were aiming at defeating the exhausted Yi Shiwen and gain instant fame. As to how shameless this act was, they didn't care. On the contrary, they were very complacent from this. They only considered it as their praise. Yes, if you don't want to accept our challenge, then simply throw in the towel and we will walk away. The second Zhong brother said in a provocative tone. Well, brother, I think he has got no guts. The youngest Zhong brother pretended to be cool and said, Shameless! Behind Yi Shiwen, Yirishue frowned and said, She was very mad at them as this act was no different from taking advantage of someone else. Initially, they did not dare to stand up on their own against Yi Shiwen, and now that he was exhausted after a battle, they were trying to provoke him by implying that he was a coward. In her view, it was really shameless. Other disciples of Qifeng Mountain Sub-School were also glaring and giving angry looks to the 3 brothers because this was simply too outrageous. while other disciples of different sub-schools were also looking at the three brothers with a look of disdain in their eyes and were cursing them for this shameless act. All eyes were fixated on Yishiwen, waiting how he would answer. The stern-looking Yishiwen suddenly chuckled and said, "You can certainly challenge me, and I am always ready to take on people like you any day." NT, author has used amawago, which means any Tom, Dick, or Harry. "What, you dare look down on us three brothers?" the second brother said in an angry voice. "If you want to challenge me, you will have to bet 100 spirit stones, and if lost, no money returns," Yishiwen indifferently said. When the three Zongshi brothers heard this, they froze for a moment because they never expected that Yishiwen would actually put forward such a condition. One must know that 100 spirit stones was a big amount for an ordinary Xiantian master. But Zong Boss nodded and said, "All right." In his view, as long as they beat Yishiwen, they would not lose anything. He didn't want to delay the fight even for 1 minute, because Yishiwen might recover from his exhaustion, which would naturally be very unfavorable to them. The three Zongshi brothers immediately agreed to the terms of battle. These three brothers really were so shameless, but this time, they had probably miscalculated by thinking that they could easily bully Yishiwen. "All three of you can come together," Yishiwen said. "What did you just say?" the Zong boss said, but since they did not have any sense of shame, they would of course take this chance to work together and defeat Yishiwen. Boom! The three Zongshi brothers, with their huge statures and inconsistent speeds, instantly rushed towards Yishiwen. The overall strength of the three Zongshi brothers was quite high, and they actually were the masters of Xiantian's second stage, and their boss had transformed 40% Xiantian Jinqi and was already at the peak of Xiantian's second stage, although he was not as strong as Chu Sun, but the difference between them was not very wide. All three of them together smacked their fists with their combined strength, actually somewhat stronger than that of Chu Sun. Many spectating disciples, without uttering a single word, were anxiously watching the fight. Bang! 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 Yi Zaiwen's arm instantly blurred and blocked their joint attack. Soon, they felt as if they had collided with an iron wall. They had originally expected that Yishiwen had already exhausted his Jinqi, because if they had teamed up to fight against Chu Sun, they would definitely have exhausted themselves. But from the appearance of Yishiwen, either his complexion was red due to fatigue, nor did he look exhausted even after fighting a fierce battle with Chu Sun. This had made them to secretly complain in their hearts at their decision to fight Yishiwen. But Yishiwen did not give them any chance of respite. Bang! Yishiwen used his one hand to catch a punch from the youngest brother, followed by using another hand. He instantly punched him. Kara! With a crisp sound of breaking bones, the youngest Zong brother's hand was instantly broken by Yi Zaiwen's punch. Yishiwen then lifted one foot and shot a lightning-fast kick covered with a terrifying Jinqi and shoved directly into the belly of the youngest brother. He screamed again, and his stout body was instantly sent flying out and severely fell on the ground, and he fainted. Third brother! The second Zong brother roared and rushed towards Yishiwen, but then he also walked on his brother's footsteps. Yishiwen severely blasted his palm on his chest using the move Leveling Storm 4 strokes, which fractured his ribs, and he spouted a mouthful of blood and fell upside down on the ground. When their boss saw that the two brothers had been blasted away by Yishiwen, he quickly shouted, "I will." But he couldn't finish the sentence, as in a flash, Yi Zaiwen's overwhelming punch blasted. Boom! Yi Zaiwen's punch blasted away the Zong boss, and his body severely hit on the side of a tree, and he fell unconscious. Chapter 87. NT, thanks to Savanchantha, US, for sponsoring chapters 87. This is the third chapter of Saturday's grand release. 2 more to come. Chapter 87. Yishiwen, come out. Bingdao Subschool's courtyard was located among the courtyards of the 3 major subcases. With an ice-cold look on his face, Chu Sun was standing outside, occasionally looking towards the room inside the courtyard. Beside him stood a blue-robed youth with a dignified appearance and smile on his face. He looked at Chu Sun and said, "I heard that you were defeated by a country bumpkin." Chu Sun shot a cold glance at him. This blue-robe youth was called Gong Yao, and like Chu Sun, he was also one of top disciples of Bingdao's sub-school, even stronger compared to him. Gee, this news has spread everywhere and has turned us into a laughing stock, and now people are laughing at our Bingdao sub-school. Our reputation has been thoroughly discredited. Do you want to sell us? Gong Yao laughed, and said. This is not something you should joke about. Chu Sun said in a cold voice. I will do something about it myself. You can't do it yourself. Gong Yao smiled and said. Because recently, I've heard that in the last 3 days, 30 people challenged him and no one could defeat him. After Yi Shiwen had defeated Chu Sun and the 3 Zhongshu brothers, soon, a lot of disciples had been attracted to come and challenge Yi Shiwen, hoping to beat him and earning fame in the process. For now, do not look for any trouble with Yi Shiwen. At this time, the door opened and came out a man with an appearance of more than 20 years old and an ice-cold facial expression, even more than Chu Sun's usual cold look. He was wearing dark blue clothes, tall stature, and possessed an overbearing aura. Why? Chu Sun asked without trying to be disrespectful in front of that man. Because he was strongest of this year's disciples from Bingdao sub-school, Shangguan Shuani, with an unfathomable cultivation, and was ranked among the top 3 players from all the sub-schools. Assessment examination will be held in 2 days, so do not complicate the situation. Shangguan Shuani said in an indifferent voice. Everyone's watching our actions, moreover, you may not be his match. Later, we will take our time and deal with him. Make a full preparation and perform outstandingly in the assessment, understood? Yes. In just 3 days of harvest, Yi Zaiwen's inventory now had 3,000 spirit stones. All of a sudden, gaining this many spirit stones was simply unimaginable even for the masters of Xiantian 4th or 5th stage. Because Yi Shiwen had defeated Chu Sun and Zhongshu 3 brothers, he had become part of many rumors and his fame had become comparable to that of the well-known figures. Chu Sun was undoubtedly one of strongest top disciples of Bingdao Major Sub-School, and although the 3 Zhongshu brothers were very shameless, but a lot of people could not help but admit that they were very powerful, especially when the 3 of them fought together. Their total strength would be more than that of common top disciples. Among the disciples of these sub-schools, there were some so-called seed disciples. These seed disciples were the strongest in every respect and existed in each social stratum of disciples. There were seed disciples present among the outer disciples, inner disciples and core disciples as well. Seed disciples were the most formidable group of people, and the sub-schools would cultivate these seed disciples. Chu Sun and Zhongshu 3 brothers were also the seed disciples. Yi Shiwen had previously defeated Wen Shuyang, but he was only a quasi-seed disciple, so defeating him was nothing compared to defeating Chun Sun and Zhongshu brothers. There were countless famous disciples who wanted to challenge Yi Shiwen, but how could Yi Shiwen just accept so many challenges? So Yi Shiwen had set some rules. If they wanted to challenge him, they must hand over 100 spirit stones, otherwise they won't get a chance to fight him. Also, each day, he would accept challenges from not more than 10 people. This would directly eliminate those who just wanted to be famous but had no strength or money to challenge, so in just 3 days, Yi Zaiwen's total stock of spirit stones had suddenly gone up to more than 3,000 spirit stones. One could say that Yi Shiwen had suddenly become rich, because even for a seed disciple like Chu Sun and other seeds disciples, 100 spirit stones were close to their net worth. Not to mention, for the ordinary disciples, especially those who had just entered into the Xiantian realm, having 10 spirit stones was not bad. Among the challengers during this period, there were some seeds disciples as well, some of whom were even more powerful than Chu Sun, and it was very tough for Yi Shiwen to defeat them. But Yi Shiwen had a great harvest because these seeds disciples were very powerful, with each having his own trump skill, and it was very difficult to deal with each of them, which was again a major harvest for Yi Zaiwen's battle experience. And after fighting with these strong people, Yi Zaiwen's various martial arts had been greatly tempered, and he had become even more skilled at using them in fights. Now, everyone was aware of the fact that in the Qifeng Mountain Sub-School, there was such an outstanding figure. Yishuan naturally had gained a rank among the top seed disciples, and almost everyone among the sub-school disciples had recognized his terrifying monstrous strength. Even if they hated it, they had to admit it. Yishuan had been able to feel a huge power surging in his body, and he felt as if he was standing on the threshold of a breakthrough which could happen at any time, and then he would finally break through to next stage and become a Xiantian second stage master. Once he entered into the Xiantian second stage, his strength would immediately have a rapid progress, and by that time, he would be able to contend with the elite masters, who were at the peak of Xiantian third stage and possessed 60% transformed Xiantian Jinqi. Now Yishuan had enough spirit stones to support him through his breakthrough without any problem. So long as there were enough spirit stones, having a breakthrough would never be difficult for him. After entering into the main sect, the competition pressure had become greater. Boom! A majestic aura suddenly burst out in the courtyard of the Qifeng Mountain Subschool and quickly spread in the surrounding area. It was a breakthrough into the Xiantian realm. There was a look of surprise on Yi Zaiwen's face, because this time, the only person in the Qifeng Mountain Subschool who could have a breakthrough into the Xiantian realm was his sister, Yi Ruxue. While Yishuan was playing around outside with the challengers, Yi Ruxue had decided not to come out until her closed-door training would finish and she would break into the Xiantian realm. Yishuan was about to rush inside the courtyard and congratulate Yi Ruxue when suddenly, a hoarse roar resounded throughout the sky. Yishuan, come out! Chapter 88. NT, thanks to Sivanchantha, US, for sponsoring Chapter 88. This is the fourth chapter of Saturday's grand release. One more to come. Chapter 88. Xiaoyang Elder Yishuan was about to rush inside the courtyard and congratulate Yi Ruxue when suddenly, a hoarse roar resounded throughout the sky. Yishuan, come out! The roar was instantly followed by a terrifying coercive aura which pressed down toward the courtyard. This pressure was so terrifying and sudden that it took Yishuan by surprise and overwhelmed him. Who? Yishuan shouted along with his Xiantian Jinqi rolling out to confront that coercive aura. The collision between both of their Jinqi directly produced a windstorm. But it was obvious that Yi Zaiwen's Xiantian Jinqi was not a match for the incredible Jinqi released by the other party, which came down all the way and completely crushed Yi Zaiwen's Jinqi. Xiantian Jin Yuan. An astonished look flashed in Yi Zaiwen's eyes because this visitor was definitely not one of the disciples who had come to challenge him, as only the masters of Xiantian 6th stage or above could possess Xiantian Jin Yuan. When a Xiantian master would reach the peak of the Xiantian 5th stage, he would have transformed 100% of his Houtian Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi. At that time, if he would want to break into the Xiantian 6th stage, then it would occur only after a metamorphosis when the Xiantian Jinqi would start transforming into Xiantian Jinyuan, which was considered the second metamorphosis of life. Once the transformation was successful, the life expectancy from the original 200 years would also increase to more than 500 years. Xiantian 6th stage masters were a lot more powerful compared to the masters of Xiantian 5th stage, and only 1 in a dozen was able to have a qualitative change in their Jinqi, which was necessary to step into the Xiantian 6th stage. Yiyuan School main sect also classified this as a standard of division, where masters of Xiantian 6th stage or above could become core disciples and those below 6th stage could only become inner disciples. Although the difference was of only a single stage, but there was a difference of heaven and earth between the treatments of masters on these stages. Most of the elders were masters of Xiantian 6th stage who were originally the core disciples, with many of them reaching the deadline age of nearly 500 years, trying to break through to the Jindao realm. Since these core disciples had been unable to reach Jindao realm, so they had decided to become elders for the sub-schools. But even so, all these elders were scary existences and were far stronger than ordinary disciples. Who are you? Yishuan came out of the courtyard and was surprised to find an old man, clad in black clothes, glaring angrily at him. Even if this time, he might put his Xiaoyang sub-school in the danger of getting punished, he must strangle the danger in the cradle. In the sky, a descending moon intensely collided with the big hand, which caused terrifying air explosions, sending layer by layer ripples of airwaves in all directions. The pressure was increasing on Yi Zaiwen's body while his blade had fiercely collided with the big hand, but even after displaying the full essence of the creative concept of his blade technique, he had still been unable to block the incoming attack. Yi Shiwen had been forced down by the virtue of superior strength of the old man. Yi Shiwen was soon pressed down, and his bones started to make crackling sound. His skeleton was facing an intense friction, although his body was insanely tough, just as strong as the steel, but when put under such a kind of terrifying coercion, it seemed as if his body would explode any time. "Old man, what are you doing?" Yi Shiwen gritted his teeth and shouted in a voice filled with anger. This old guy was definitely not holding back, and it seemed as if he was going to kill Yi Shiwen right there right then. That black clothes simply ignored Yi Shiwen, and his big hand pressed down while fully destroying the live picture of creative concept. "Old man, in the future, I will certainly return the favor for today." Yi Shiwen gritted his teeth and said with a lot of sweat crazily dripping down his face. In just 10 years, he would be able to easily crush this old guy. But right now, his strength was not enough. This was the first time that Yi Shiwen had thoroughly felt so helpless, craving for strength. He just needed enough strength so that a day like this would never come again where he would feel so helpless. Chapter 89. NT, thanks to Sivanchantha, US, for sponsoring chapters 89. This is the fifth and final chapter of Saturday's grand release. With this, I conclude Saturday's grand release. Look forward to one more grand release on Sunday. Enjoy. Chapter 89. Mighty Lin Jiantian. "Old man, in the future, I will certainly return the favor for today." Yi Shiwen gritted his teeth and said with a lot of sweat crazily dipping down his face. "You do not have a future!" The old man shouted with a hideous look on his face. "Stop!" A loud shout came, followed by a big hand that came straight down from the sky and caught that old man's big hand and directly exploded it. "What were you trying to do?" A thundering voice resounded in the sky and a figure came down flying. This was none other than Qifeng Mountain Sub-School's former ancestor, Lin Jiantian. The black-clothed old man looked coldly at Lin Jiantian. "This little beast has severely injured the seed disciples of our Shaoyang sub-school, and there's no way for our school to participate in the assessment. This hatred is totally irreconcilable," that old man said and gritted his teeth. "Bullshit!" Yi Shiwen gasped for breath and said, "It was them who first came to bully the disciples of our sub-school and were forcefully trying to occupy our courtyard. They even injured my brother and were going to cripple him. They went too far and I was just returning the favor, but I was merciful and did not waste their martial arts." "Little bastard, you!" The black-clothed old man cursed, but it was not that he did not know the ins and outs of whole matter. He was just trying to take advantage of the fact that Lin Jiantian had not come back yet, and this was the best opportunity to take revenge on Yi Shiwen, and settle things once and for all. But things didn't go as he had planned after the intervention of Lin Jiantian. "Get out of here!" Lin Jiantian thundered loudly and waved his big sleeves. Almost instantly, a terrifying force arrived in front of the black-clothed old man. Poof! The black-clothed old man spurted out a mouthful of blood and his skinny body was sent flying upside down. Only one hit had seriously injured him, and he was stunned, staring at the Lin Jiantian because he never thought that Lin Jiantian could actually be so strong. "Jin Dao!" Black-clothed old man muttered while glaring at Lin Jiantian with his fierce eyes. He said, "Lin Jiantian, you'll regret it. Get lost! No one dares to touch my disciples," Lin Jiantian said in a strong voice. He had clearly demonstrated the strength of the Jin Dao. The disciples of the Jin Dao realm were called true disciples. Compared to them, the core disciples could only be considered mid-level personnel, but true disciples were considered at the top. In a major sect like Yuan School main sect, only few hundred true disciples were present, but the added count of core disciples and inner disciples together was almost 100,000. The gap between the positions of these two parties could be seen just from the numbers. The black-clothed old man looked bitterly at Lin Zhantian. No doubt, if they were not in the premises of the main sect, he would have been directly beheaded by Lin Zhantian. The competition among the sub-schools was allowed as long as there were no direct fights between the factions. From the perspective of the main sect, as long as the whole martial arts community was flourishing inside the school, competition was permitted. The black-clothed old man looked towards the disciples of Qingfeng Mountain Sub-School and bitterly left. "Let's go inside," Lin Zhantian said. After the return of Lin Zhantian, it seemed as if the Qingfeng Mountain Sub-School had suddenly gained back its backbone, and the disciples followed him inside, happy expressions on their faces. After hearing about all the events that had occurred during his absence, Lin Zhantian smiled and looked at Yishiwen, then said, "Good, well done, you are the power and prestige of our Qingfeng Mountain Sub-School." Lin Zhantian was also surprised in his heart because this was quite unexpected, although he had always been very optimistic about Yishiwen, but did not expect that he would actually be able to become so strong that not even the seed disciples would be his match. Those seed disciples were considered elite among the elites and were generally very powerful, but had been surprisingly defeated by Yishiwen. Lin Zhantian was overjoyed with these turn of events. "In my absence, all of you have done very well," Lin Zhantian said. "Thanks, Ancestor, for your praise," everyone said in unison. "Now I will tell you about the reason behind the sudden departure of all the elders, although this is a major affair, but I think it is necessary for all of you to know about it," Lin Zhantian said. The looks of all the disciples suddenly became serious because they knew that a matter which was major for Lin Zhantian could never be trivial. "This thing is slightly strange. For the triennial assessment examination, all of the sub-schools send their respective elite disciples, but this time, actually disciples of more than 30 sub-schools were attacked, out of which, disciples from 6 sub-schools were completely annihilated and not even their skeletons could be found," Lin Zhantian said with a solemn look on his face. Everyone present there held their breaths. Though these sub-schools were just Yuan schools, sub-schools, and relative to the main sect, their strength was not much, but compared to other sects, it was still very large. But these were the elite disciples of various sub-schools, not to mention, they were also being accompanied by a few elders, and these elders were super experts of Xiantian 5th stage or more. How could they dare to touch such a team? But to be able to completely annihilate such a team of experts, this was not possible for ordinary forces. In the past, there have been cases when disciples were attacked, but they were all isolated phenomenon or vendetta, but this time, it is not unusual that out of a total of over 100 sub-schools, more than 30 sub-schools have been attacked, Lin Zhantian said. This thing has caused the sect to have a high degree of attention to this matter because there may be large hostile forces after our disciples. The sect has sent many experts to investigate about this matter. The reason of sharing this thing with you is because soon, you will enter the main sect. After that, you need to be very careful, Lin Zhantian said. Participating in the assessment was especially important for sub-schools because it would get easier for their disciples to be directly promoted to become the inner disciples or core disciples in the main sect. Naturally, those who performed outstandingly in the assessment would get more popular and would be able to get more resources for their respective sub-schools. This was the reason why the elder of Shaoyang sub-school was so frantic. Yes, everyone said in unison. Sunday. I announced the grand release of 3 to 5 sponsored chapters on Sunday. I decided to organize this grand release to compensate for the lost sponsored chapters this week. Let's see if I can reach my target of releasing up to chapter 93 by Sunday. Monday, any sponsored chapters one couldn't release on Sunday will come on Monday along with Sunday's regular chapter 95 and Monday's regular chapter 96 raised so far, $150. 500%. Queue is cleared for sponsored chapters 90, 91, 92, 93 and 94. Thanks again to Sivanchantha, US, for sponsoring chapters 87, 88, 89, 90, 91 and 92. Thanks to Jeffrey Dementir, France, for sponsoring chapter 93. Thanks to Thomas Metzger, US, and Corey Sagawa, U.S., for sponsoring Chapter 94. Chapter 90. NT. Damn, I don't think I will be able to reach my target of releasing up to Chapter 93 by Sunday. Stuff came up and I was a lot busier today, so today's grand release will contain only Chapters 90, 91 and 92. You will get yet another grand release of Chapters 93, 94, 95 and 96 on Monday. And after that, one more grand release on Tuesday of sponsored Chapters 97, 98, 99 and 100. I don't plan to stop these grand releases until I release Chapter 100. Enjoy. NT, thanks to Sivanchantha, U.S., for sponsoring Chapter 90. Chapter 90 assessment begins. Lin Jiantian undoubtedly had cast a shadow of an unknown enemy in the hearts of the disciples of Qifeng Mountain Sub-School, but they were not too worried about it. After all, they were too keen to enter into the main sect. Everyone's thoughts were fully focused on the assessment examination which was going to take place a few days later, although it was not supposed to be difficult and basically everyone could pass. But this assessment was directly related to their future treatments and positions in the sect. Those who performed outstandingly could earn a lot of rewards. Yi Shiwen was only a little worried in his heart about the future. After all, there were some powerful hostile forces lurking out there, so all of them needed to be careful in future. But he didn't think about this matter for too long because it was a thing in the future, and right now, the most important matter was to perform well in the assessment. Time passed day by day and 3 days had quickly passed. It was time to finally participate in the assessment examination. Early in the morning, all of the Qifeng Mountain's disciples got up early and assembled in the courtyard entrance. Lin Jiantian looked at the crowd and said, "Today we're going to the Full Moon Peak." Full Moon Peak was one of the 10 main peaks of Yuan's school and was home to the leaders of the Vain disciples who were the direct descendants of Yuan's school's inheritance, and held the direct command over the doctrines of the school. For ages, these leaders would generally come from the Full Moon Peak. Everyone was excited because they all wanted to be able to join the Full Moon Peak, as the disciples of Full Moon Peak were considered as the most noble and honorable. But whether they would be able to enter into the Full Moon Peak depended on their performance during the assessment examination. "This assessment will be conducted on the Full Moon Peak," Lin Jiantian said. "The ancient masters of the Yuan school came forth in large numbers to create many small worlds. This time, we are going to a small world located on the Full Moon Peak, called Huanma Territory. This small world was created when an ancestor from previous generations of Yuan school used his extraordinary magical powers to open the many spaces from the Devil world and captured a lot of Huanma, and again used his magical powers to open up this small world. Huanma was a low-level devil, and was good at using magic to confuse the people, but even if it was at the lowest level among the devils, but also very tough. Yi Shiwen had read about them in some records, but in those records Devil World was treated just as a kind of myth and looked like an ancient mythology. But here, he actually heard that devils were real? Although it's only a small world, but it is 100 times larger than our Qifeng Mountain Sub-School's Blood Yuan territory. Lin Jiantian said, "Here, the danger is also higher, but this small world's most important characteristic is its transformation between real and imaginary world. Even if someone dies inside this world, he wouldn't actually die and will be sent out immediately, but the things you all will see inside are deemed to be true. Other than this feature of no one dying inside this world, the rest is similar to other small worlds." The disciples of Qifeng Mountain Sub-School were in uproar, because if that was the case then they really did not need to worry. They could just go all out, but at the same time, the competition would become more intense because everyone would have no scruples as they knew that they wouldn't die no matter what. This is a protective measure to protect the newly arrived disciples, Lin Jiantian said, but you shouldn't think that you will not die. Those Huanma are not humans and they are very good at mind control magic. Some people got their minds controlled by Huanma, and those creatures attached themselves onto the body of these people and they have since become their puppets. All of the disciples trembled in fear because if that was the case then it was really too scary. People could become zombies after being controlled by those Huanma, and after that, even if they survived, it would be worse than death. In the past, such a thing has happened when some of the disciples were being controlled, and no one knew about it, and it had nearly caused a calamity. I am telling all of this to remind you to always pay attention to your surroundings and be careful at all times. Lin Zhantian said. The assessment requirements are very simple. So long as each of you kills one Huanma, you can pass. Lin Zhantian said. This assessment will be observed by many high-level personnel of the sect, so if you give a splendid performance then you may get directly chosen by them in their veins, therefore, do your best and perform well. We promise, the disciples said in unison. Although even the weakest Huanmo was at the Hotian 9th stage, but these disciples were all at the Hotian 9th stage or above and could easily handle a low-level devil like Huanmo. Huanma were more formidable in the spiritual influence and mind control, especially those with weak minds were most vulnerable, but these were the elite disciples with strong minds, otherwise how could they have gained a high-level cultivation at such a young age? Chapter 91. NT. I am still working on Chapter 92, so for now, enjoy reading Chapter 91 Grinning Face. Thanks to Sivanchantha, U.S., for sponsoring Chapter 91. Chapter 91 The Gathering of Geniuses. Within the premises of Yuan's school main sect, one could see demon birds flying everywhere, carrying the disciples. The crowd of Qingfeng Mountain Sub-School responded with curiosity in their eyes, looking excitingly at this scene. But soon, the demon birds flew towards the foot of the full moon mountain peak. Only the elders and true disciples were allowed to fly over the full moon peak, and others could only go up from the foot of the mountain. Lin Zhantian did not go with them, but directly jumped off from his demon bird and vanished in front of everyone. Everyone went towards the plaza of Full Moon Peak, where disciples from over 100 sub-schools were arriving one after another. Over 100 sub-schools, even if each sub-school had only a few dozens of people, but after adding them up, the total number would go up to thousands of people. The good thing was that the plaza was very wide, and at the moment, it was filled with many shadows. These were the masters of the Hotian 9th stage, who were once the core disciples of their respective sub-schools. This gathering was truly magnificent and spectacular, far more than the gathering of competitions held at various sub-schools. And of course, compared to the geniuses present in the gathering for the competitions, the quality of talent here was undoubtedly much higher. Each of these sub-schools had elite disciples, and all of them had dignified appearance, especially the Xiantian level disciples. All of them were upright, and very conceited. After all, they had already entered into the Xiantian realm before joining the main sect. To be able to become a Xiantian master was an incredible achievement for the sub-school disciples, and they were considered elite among the elites. Yirishua was the latest addition to the group of Xiantian masters of the Qingfeng Mountain sub-schools. Including her, now there were a total of 4 Xiantian masters, which was an unforeseen achievement in the history of Qingfeng Mountain sub-school. Although there were a lot of strong opponents with many strong sub-schools, but some sub-schools were quite miserable with only a single Xiantian master. With over 100 sub-schools arrived for the assessment, the strength of each sub-schools was not the same. The strength of some was almost comparable to the 3 major sub-schools. It's truly spectacular! Wu Hao sighed with emotion and said. Now these disciples had truly realized that their own road to practice, in the main sect, was finally going to begin, and that there were several stronger people in the world. This scenery was going to encourage their unceasing progress. At this time, Yishiwen saw the people of 3 major sub-schools standing in front. Standing on the left were the people of Bingdao sub-school, led by a man with an extraordinary temperament. Yishiwen did not know, but this guy was the well-known Shanghuan Xuani, one of the strongest 3 disciples of this year, with an unfathomable strength. Next to the group of Bingdao sub-school was also a large group of people with each one of their disciples in the Xiantian realm. The group belonged to one of the 3 major sub-schools, Shenhuashan sub-school. It was located in the southern part of the state, next to a volcano, and its disciples practiced fire attribute power techniques, making them a stark contrast with the disciples of Bingdao Sub-School. NT. Xinhuashan Sub-School can also be called Divine Volcano Sub-School. These two sub-schools had always been consistent rivals thanks to their ranks as one of the major sub-schools and also the opposing nature of their power techniques. In short, these two sub-schools were inherently hostile towards each other and also held mutual hatred. In front of the group of Divine Volcano Sub-School, there was a man, standing proudly with an appearance of approximately 25-year-old. He was an abnormally burly man, and Yi Shiwen found out that this man was named Yan Qiling. Similar to Shangguan Shuani, he also had an unfathomable strength. On the other side of the group of Divine Volcano Sub-School, the group of Third Major Sub-School was standing. This group belonged to the Eunice Sub-School. As the name suggested, all the disciples in this major sub-school were females. The group consisted of many beautiful young female students, and all of them looked very attractive, and they had also grabbed the attraction of most of the male disciples. NT. Eunice Sub-School can also be called Jade Lady Sub-School. Their leader looked roughly 18 to 19-year-old, dressed in yellow clothes flapping in the wind, long hair, and had a delicate jade-like skin. 2 strands of hair were gently flowing by the wind over her cheeks, which were complementing her seductive appearance even more. This was the genius female disciple of Jade Lady Sub-School and was named Zhang Sunyuing. It was said that few years ago, she had easily stepped into the Xiantian realm, and no one knew what her cultivation level was now. Zhang Sunyuing, Yan Qiling and Shangguan Shuani were said to be the 3 strongest disciples of this year, and each of them had unfathomable strength. Although, other disciples would have to wait as they did not know which vein they might join, but that was not the case for the disciples of Jade Lady Sub-School, because it was already fixed for them. Jade Lady Sub-School was a subsidiary of Yiyuan School's Jade Lady Mountain Peak, so all the disciples were going to join the Jade Lady Mountain Peak in the future. And the reason was that Jade Lady Mountain Peak only accepted female disciples, while Jade Lady Sub-School had been established by a previous senior of Jade Lady Mountain Peak, so it was only obvious for the disciples of the Jade Lady Sub-School to join Jade Lady Mountain Peak. So relatively speaking, they didn't need to participate in this assessment. In addition to these 3 sub-schools, there were some other first-class sub-schools having more than 10 disciples, who had already entered into the Xiantian realm. And then, there were middle-level sub-schools like Qifeng Mountain Sub-School. Lastly, there were sub-schools with only 1 or 2 sub-Xiantian masters. In this world, where strength was the supreme law and truth, only strong could command respect. Zhang Sunyuin is just like an angel. She is the not only beautiful but is also this year's strongest disciple of Jade Lady Sub-School. I heard that it has already been decided that she is going to be the leader of the disciples at Jade Lady Mountain Peak and will also become the senior of the Mountain Peak someday. No wonder, it's really extraordinary how Jade Lady Sub-School accepts only female disciples and turns them into such strong masters. Shangguan Shuani, Yan Qiling and Zhang Sunyuin are this year's strongest among all of us, and no one even knows what their true strengths are. I have heard from some people that the 3 of them are already at the peak of Xiantian 3rd stage, or may even have reached the Xiantian 4th stage. When the disciples standing in the surrounding heard this, they could help but hold their breaths. Peak of Xiantian 3rd stage or Xiantian 4th stage? To them, masters of such strengths were simply godlike existences. Sunday, Chapter 92 in few hours. And yes, I couldn't reach my target of releasing up to Chapter 93 by Sunday. Monday, sponsored Chapters 93 and 94 will come along with Sunday's regular Chapter 95 and Monday's regular Chapter 96 raised so far, $90, 300%. Queue is cleared for sponsored Chapters 92, 93 and 94. Chapter 92. NT, thanks to Sivanchantha, US, for sponsoring Chapter 92. Chapter 92. See you later, Huan Menghan. Perhaps this level of strength was not too conspicuous in the main sect, but for many sub-schools, it was already very scary. All of these disciples were undoubtedly very talented, and after entering into the main sect, they would start to cultivate vigorously. In the future, they would most likely enter into the Zhendao realm and become true disciples. Peak of Xiantian third stage? Yixuan turned again to look at the three strongest disciples and noticed that they were probably only a step away from reaching the Xiantian fourth stage, and right now, he was not a match for any of them. But Yixuan was not worried about these three geniuses because he was confident that he would eventually be able to catch up with them. Junior sister apprentice, take a look, these are this year's disciples. Yi Zaiwen's eyes were closed when suddenly a loud voice reached his ears. Accompanied with the sound of flapping wings, 2 demon birds flew down from the sky. On top of a large eagle stood a man with an appearance of about 27-year-old, clad in traditional Chinese clothes, dancing in the wind, and there was a smile on his face. The other bird was Snow White Crane, carrying a black-clothed beautiful woman who had a pair of black curved eyebrows and pure white skin. Looking at her, it seemed as if a celestial beauty had just descended into the mortal world. Everyone's eyes were attracted to both of them. Even Yixuan was no exception, but his eyes were not on the man but on the woman atop the crane. Hua Menghan! Yixuan was determined that this was definitely the girl he had rescued in the cave. Compared to the slightly awkward girl he had seen last time, this time when he saw Hua Menghan, she was really like a fairy, having an unparalleled grace and elegance. Her appearance was truly pleasing to the eyes. Hua Menghan seemed to have noticed Yi Zaiwen's gaze and turned to look at him. After seeing Yixuan, Hua Menghan was somewhat surprised, as she did not expect to meet him so soon. Moreover, his current strength had really surprised her, because when the last time she had met him, he was only a Hotian realm master, although while rescuing her, he had beheaded Luo Tian, but at that time, she had seriously injured Luo Tian. But now, Yixuan had not just broken through to the Xiantian realm and was already at the peak of Xiantian first stage. Hua Menghan slowly descended from her crane, and step by step, walked towards Yixuan while simply ignoring the Chinese-robed youth, who was constantly trying to talk to her. You came, Hua Menghan said. And? Yixuan nodded. I still haven't thanked you for the last time, Hua Menghan said, as she was in a hurry last time and had left without thanking him personally, which could be considered a very rude behavior. It doesn't matter, that was as easy as lifting a hand. Yixuan shook his head and said as he had benefited a lot from that incident and couldn't ask for more. Junior sister apprentice. At this time, the Chinese-robed youth also came over. Who are you? The Chinese-robed youth frowned and shouted in a low tone. He had instinctively felt some threat from Yixuan. Seeing the youth questioning Yixuan, Hua Menghan wrinkled her black eyebrow. But right then Yixuan said, Qifeng Mountain Sub-School, Yixuan. Yixuan could see arrogance and a look of disdain in the eyes of that Chinese-robed youth. The main sect disciples always looked down on the disciples from sub-schools, as there was a huge difference between their strengths. But that Chinese-robed youth forced a smile on his face and said, Hello, junior disciple, I'm Hu Yanheng, a core disciple. When Yixuan heard that Hu Yanheng was a core disciple, adding to his arrogant tone, the meaning was clear that he was obviously pursuing Hua Menghan and was one of her suitors. And this was a method of warning him to stay away. Just like Hua Menghan, Yixuan also neglected Hu Yanheng. He took out a phoenix-shaped jade pendant, then put it before Hua Menghan and said, I give this jade rare treasure back to you. There was a shocked look in Hu Yanheng's eyes, and his gaze was continuously swinging between Hua Menghan and Yixuan. How could he not know that this jade pendant was very precious to Hua Menghan, and she would never allow others to even take a look at it? And now, it actually appeared in the hands of Yixuan. Exactly what had happened between the two of them, that Hua Menghan had actually given her precious jade pendant to someone else? Thinking of all sorts of possibilities, suddenly, Hu Yanheng looked at Yixuan with a killing look flashing in his eyes. Since you already have it, just keep it, Hua Menghan lightly said. In comparison to what you did for me, this jade pendant is simply not enough. When many disciples standing around in the crowd have heard Hua Menghan, they could secretly make a guess that Yixuan must have handled some major matter that had actually led to his friendship with this fairy. Yi Shiwen did not want to explain anything to anyone as this secret belonged to the two of them, and he wanted to keep this thing a secret between just the two of them. Assessment is about to start. I won't take your time anymore. After saying a few words to Yi Shiwen, she didn't stay there for too long and flew into the sky on her crane and soon disappeared from the eyes of everyone. When Hu Yangheng saw Huan Menghan leaving, he was also not in a mood to stay there. He first gave gloomy glances to Yi Shiwen, then mounted his eagle and left. After the two of them left, many disciples of various sub-schools started to give curious looks to Yi Shiwen because they didn't know how he had come to know a disciple from Full Moon Peak. Even Shangguan Shuani, Yan Qiling and Zhang Sunyuan had turned back and were looking curiously at Yi Shiwen. Although they did not have to be specific, but anyone could make a guess that those two were definitely the disciples of Full Moon Peak, because except the true disciples and elder class people, as well as some characters with special permissions, only the disciples of this peak were allowed to fly over the Full Moon Peak. The people of Qifeng Mountain Sub-School were especially very curious. They couldn't understand how Hua Menghan was on such friendly terms with Yi Shiwen, and it seemed that she owed him a great debt as well. Otherwise, why would she be willing to give her personal jade pendant to him? Although they did not know the specific effects of that jade pendant, but with just one look, anyone could see that the jade pendant was really extraordinary. Faced with so many curious gazes, Yi Shiwen directly closed his eyes. Yi Shiwen had killed Luo Tian and people of his clan, so he didn't want to get in trouble by getting a new formidable enemy. Yi Shiwen also did not want to develop a habit of stirring up trouble wherever he goes. The crowd did not continue to look at Yi Shiwen because assessment examination had finally started. NT, good night guys. Monday, bonus chapters 93 and 94 will come along with Sunday's regular chapter 95 and Monday's regular chapter 96, raised so far, $60, 200%. Queue is cleared for bonus chapters 93 and 94. The purple-clothed elder waved his hand and a huge bubble formed and they were wrapped inside it, and the team quickly disappeared from the eyes of the crowd. No one knew after how long, the team of Qifeng Mountain Sub-School finally appeared in the Huanma territory, and everywhere, they could see a devastated scenery. The ground was withered and from time to time, magical fire was coming out of the fissures in the ground and the air containing the mixture of lingqi and machi was blowing on their faces. The environment here was quite harsh, and originally, this territory belonged to the devil race which was once destroyed and they had already left, not to mention those Huanma devils were the remaining part of the lost devil civilization. It was similar to a situation where a modern man would leave the city to live in the forest for decades. Is this Huanma territory? It is even more desolate than expected. One of the disciples sighed and said. Yes. Zhang Yang nodded. It seems like the random transportation like the last time, and without a map, we do not even know our location. There's no need to hurry. Once we find a Huanma city, we will naturally get a map from there. Yi Feng said, as in the Huanma territory, Huanma race should be considered the indigenous, and it was not surprising if they had a map. Moreover, Huanma belonged to the devil race, but they certainly were intelligent creatures, therefore they also had small towns in the Huanma territory. But these towns were simply just a prototype and couldn't be regarded as real towns. Suddenly the air distorted and the surrounding scenery instantly changed, and in a flash, numerous tall buildings and a bustling metropolis took shape in front of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt nostalgic about this scenery. For a long time he had not seen such scenery which used to be so common for him. That very common scenery containing the reinforced concrete buildings of the city. But at this moment, seemed so friendly. This scene was buried deep inside his heart, but he did not know when it would disappear. Yi Shiwen suddenly sneered and punched forward, containing the terrifying might of a tornado which swept clean the scene instantly. At this time, the nostalgic scene disappeared and returned back into the scene of Huanma territory. As he had expected, this was really the illusion magic, although he was well prepared before coming, as Lin Zhantian had reminded everyone to be attentive in the Huanma territory. Huanma excelled at using illusion magic to confuse people, and once someone fell into the trap, he will be quickly defeated or even eaten. Sure enough, when Yishiwen opened his eyes, he saw hundreds of Huanma heading towards them. Chapter 94. NT, thanks to Thomas Metzger, U.S., and Corey Sagawa, U.S., for sponsoring Chapter 94. Chapter 94 Masters intercept Yishiwen heaved a sigh of relief. He knew that Huanmo itself was not a strong creature, but the problem was their raid. They would first release an illusion magic and people would unknowingly fall into the illusion, although most of the experts had firm minds and wouldn't take long to break out of the illusion. But even if they took a couple of seconds to break out, these 2 seconds would often decide their fate, because for ordinary people, 2 seconds were nothing, but that was not the case for a warrior facing Huanmo raid. Sure enough, Yishiwen had not expected but the disciples of Qifeng Mountain disciples would so easily escape from Huanmo's illusion. Even if the numbers of Huanmo were 5 times more than their own, under the leadership of Yishiwen and the others, killing those Huanma had become child's play for the team. Everyone easily killed 1 or more Huanma and completed the assessment without any fundamental difficulty. But, even after quickly slaughtering these Huanma, they were not relaxed, because clearance was not their main goal. Clearing the assessment was easy, unless someone had a severe bad luck. Passing with extraordinary scores was their actual goal. Anyway, this test had a full month's time and everyone had plenty of time to hone their skills, but also kill more Huanma for better performance. Everyone knew that their actions inside the Huanma territory were being observed by high-level school personnel, so they just needed to give a good performance to catch their attention. Now that we are inside the Huanma territory, we may encounter danger at any time, and those Huanma may appear anywhere, so we have to be careful at all time, Yifeng said. Yes, the disciples said in unison. Before coming here, the goal for these disciples was to pass the assessment, and then only they would think about getting good results. But since Yishiwen was with them, their morale had increased. In their hearts, Yishiwen had completely replaced Yifeng, although Yishiwen was younger in age, but to them, he was just like their spiritual leader. Yi Zaiwen's strength was still not comparable to that of Shangguan Xuani, but his strength was still among the group of disciples with their strengths right below the 3 strongest disciples. And being led by such a strong master was very assuring for them, as anyway they won't die in the Huanma territory. However, Yifeng was keeping silent and was not talking much after coming to the Huanma territory because he was little anxious, as Huanma were not their only opponents. Even excluding the 3 major sub-schools, there still were a lot of strong sub-schools with many Xiantian masters. These Xiantian masters from various sub-schools had come from all over the Great Yu State to enter into Yiyuan's school and possessed different kinds of martial arts and unknown killing techniques and skills. So far, they had not yet encountered another team, but sooner or later, they might encounter a very formidable opponent. Although they won't die in the Huanma territory, but they would still be thrown outside after dying. Days passed, and shortly, the Qifeng Mountain crowd had spent more than 3 days in the Huanma territory. In 3 days, they faced Huanma raid several times, but the crowd had already become experienced in fighting off the Huanma and had at least beheaded 56 Huanma, and with that, they had extraordinarily completed the assessment. Wu Hao and Qian Wanru were on the verge of having a breakthrough, and it seemed that they might have it in the Huanma territory. It was a good thing for them that they were going to enter into the Xiantian realm before joining the main sect. On this day, they approached a mountain and were thinking about exploring it when suddenly 7 figures jumped out and intercepted them. They were, in every respect, releasing an extremely terrifying aura and were definitely very powerful Xiantian masters. The complexion of the disciples of Qifeng Mountain Sub-School suddenly changed. 7 powerful Xiantian masters had actually come out of nowhere and intercepted them. One must know that even a moderate rank sub-school had less than 7 Xiantian masters and Qifeng Mountain Sub-School had only 4. And each of these 7 Xiantian masters had a strong Xiantian aura, and the weakest of them was at least a master of Xiantian's second stage, which had totally startled them. Who are you people? Why are you blocking our way? Yishuan came forward and asked. He had noticed 3 of these 7 masters in the plaza. He was paying attention to the strong masters in the plaza and had made a mental note of the top players from various sub-schools. He knew that these people were one of the strongest Xiantian masters of this year. But he had not seen the other 4 masters, and it was possible that they didn't belong to any sub-schools and were definitely newcomers. After all, Yuan's school was one of the 4 great sects and held a huge influence in the Great Yu Stat, so during the triennial examination, the aspiring disciples were not only from the respective sub-schools but from all parts of the state. Various powerful clans from all over the Great Yu State would also send their elite disciples to join the main sect and bring glory to their clans. Although the number of disciples who had entered the Huanma territory to participate in the assessment exam was very large, but Huanma territory was very huge, much larger compared to Blood Yuan territory, and therefore, they had not encountered other disciples for these many days. But as the days would pass, the number of encounters would continue to grow more and more. These people were not very old and seemed around the age of 20, but all of them had a dignified appearance, and presumably were top masters in the younger generation of their clans. You are Yishuan? The Chinese-robed young man who was standing in the middle and seemed like the leader of these 7 masters asked. All the sub-school disciples had heard about the recent exploits of Yishuan because the rumors had made him quite famous among the disciples as the undefeated sub-school disciple. The disciples from other schools or clans, who didn't belong to any sub-schools, were generally very talented. After all, they were not stupid. If they tried to enter into the main sect with pure strength, then they would only become handyman disciples. That is the reason why only strong masters of Xiantian realm would come to join the Yiyuan school's main sect. Yi Zaiwen's heart sank when he heard that they had actually come for him. He looked towards the Chinese-robed man and replied, "It's me, what do you want?" You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.